Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Academy Anonymous podcast, where we are covering all the latest news and updates regarding the Oscar race for next year's Oscar ceremony for the films that have come out in 2025. As always, I am your co-host, Joseph.
And I'm Jules. And before we get started, just a reminder to all of you that please check out our website, our official website, framesandflicker.com. You can see the website on the poster art for the podcast. And we actually have brand new predictions there. We updated all the predictions, all for the major categories: picture, acting, screenplay, all the text. All of those have been updated, so check that out. And also, please follow us on Twitter at Academy Anon. That's on the poster art as well for the podcast. Check us out, please. We'd love to have you. And so let's get started. One of the big things we're going to talk about today is a film that everyone has been talking about that had its big premiere last weekend, and
It's public premiere because people have been
Right.
talking about it for weeks now. People who've gotten the exclusive golden ticket to watch the
Right.
film. What is it, like 2 or 3 weeks ahead of everyone?
Right. And so, it's obviously we're talking about Universal's Big Pony, which is the second part of Wicked. And I'll just say that, you and I had very particular thoughts about the first Wicked. I wasn't a big fan, neither were you, when it came down to predicting what the first Wicked was going to amass at the Academy Awards. I think we both fell short. We both predicted like around 6 nominations, and it actually ended up reaping 10 nominations, which it overperformed. It did incredibly well. It was a big hit last year. Everyone was talking about it, and I think last year it really took a lot of people by surprise. I think people weren't expecting that much from it, from the visuals that they had seen, all the commercial, all the lead
Remember,
up.
yeah, that was part of the narrative. Remember it, right? That idea that like the trailer comes out like in spring or
Super
summer
Bowl.
and people trash it,
Right.
right? And then, no one's expecting it to do well. And then lo and behold,
Right. It does incredibly well. And I think people were having very euphoric and very ecstatic reactions to the first Wicked. So I think when this season started, people just assumed automatically, well, part 2, of course, it's going to be nominated for Best Picture and probably reap as many nominations as the first one. And we got our first taste of that when, Variety and Hollywood Reporter and the punditry and social media was getting their first peek at the film.
Right, the trade organizations.
Right. And it started to sound like, oh, guess what, guys? I just saw Wicked, and it's just as good as the first, so expect as many nominations,
Yeah.
if not more.
If not more.
And expect that, yes, Ariana Grande is going to win this time, and it's going to win this category as well, and Cynthia Erivo is going to gun it to win, and just all these sort of hyperbole that was really kind of confusing to read, and also felt a little bit to me, I don't know if it felt that way to you, but it just felt a little strange. It felt a little bit, what did you think?
Well, as with every time that, a trade publication gets involved in the conversation, at least my mind starts to wonder, it's just important to, sell these movies. These are the movies, you know what I mean?
Right.
We can't devote an entire cover to a fantastic film we saw the other day by Alain Guirardi, Misericordia.
yes.
Like, we're not going to devote a whole cover on Variety to that.
Right.
And we're not going to really talk about it too much. So it's more important that we sort of support these tent poles because the industry gets by on them.
Right. But it was suspicious. It was suspicious because they were like, it felt like they were curating who they were going to let into the fold to get that first sneak peek, to get the ball rolling.
Oh, yeah.
To get the ball rolling. It felt like they were inviting people that really loved the first Wicked.
Right.
And so where we stood at the beginning before the film was coming out was, number one, it's hard for sequels to get nominated repeatedly for Best Picture. It happens, of course, and it's happened recently. It happened with Avatar recently. It happened with Dune recently.
That's what I was going to say. Like,
Right.
to be fair, when the year kicks off and everyone is pegging Wicked for good to be a top 5 movie, a top 3 movie, a top 2 movie, whatever, I do think that, to be fair, there's this sort of expectance that if you did well the first time, that you're going to do well the second time. And so Dune Part 2, Avatar,
Right.
Avatar
Right,
2, etc.
But I will say that I think that expectancy in and of itself is problematic and is faulty, because if we really take a big if we take a big snapshot of how those original iterations and the subsequent iterations tend to do, they always tend to, more often than not, underperform from the first iteration. So even a film like
We've
Dune
always said that, yeah.
and we always said that. Even a film like Dune Part 2, which was a really unanimously praised film, I think it has even a bigger Metacritic score than the first one
I
does.
liked it more than the first one.
Right. It was a huge hit. And people, I think, even, as we were winding down and people were doing their final predictions, it was being predicted for around, 8, 9 nominations. And it ended up with about half actually of what the original film ended up with. And that's a critically acclaimed part 2
yeah.
anticipated that did well in the box office. Exactly.
Right.
It's still, it's what we always say, diminishing returns is the law of the land.
Yeah.
Avatar as well. It did okay critically, not like the first one. Still got an eye for Best Picture, but lo and behold, diminishing returns.
Cut it by nearly half again,
Exactly.
from 9 to 4.
Exactly. So this idea that somehow Wicked was going to repeat the nominations as, that the first one had was always, I always saw it like
faulty.
It's like you're not taking a fair assessment of how sequels tend to do, at least in the modern age, in these in the Academy Awards.
Within the Academy, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And then what I would also say to that is, especially if you look at something like Dune last year, diminishing returns often has nothing to do with the actual quality. There was nothing wrong with the costumes of Dune Part 2 or the makeup. It's just very much the Academy feeling, been there, done that.
Yeah, we just did that.
I want to do something new.
Right. But I'll also say that, this idea of, sequels, continuations, it's a tricky line because in a film like Avatar, for example, they're all separate films. They're continuations, but they're not sequels. By that, I mean, they're not one film split into 3 ways. When you start getting into terrain of a studio really trying to push a product and really trying to, squeeze out as much juice as possible, a la Dune, which split an original story into 2.
Right.
You really run the risk of, did you have to split this into 2?
So you're sort of talking about the idea of, for example, Dune is one text.
Right.
And so they decided to divide it into to be as loyal to the text as possible. Same thing with the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. You have 3 different texts: Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King, right? When you look at The Hobbit, I think The Hobbit was, sort of cut up in these ways where they really extended what was initially one work. And so I guess what you're talking about is some maybe studio malfeasance,
right,
where they feel like, why would we make one last chapter of Harry Potter when we can make
5?
2? Yeah, I'm saying, that we'll do Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Deathly Hallows Part 2. Like, what's it, like Twilight, the final installment of Twilight, the same thing. You know what I mean? What if we can squeeze, opening weekend twice? Let's do it like twice so we can make double the money. That's what you're referring to, right?
So exactly, yeah. Dune is one text split into 2, under the guise of we have to be as rigorously loyal to the text as possible. But really, why would we do one Denis Villeneuve Dune project? Why don't we do it twice? Because not only will we have twice the box office profits, twice the acclaim, twice the Academy Award nominations. Well, in that particular case, they had two of 3 because they had good box office in both. Well, one of them was during the 2021 pandemic,
Right.
Post-pandemic. So
Still solid for the time.
Right. And certainly critical acclaim was high for both, but you still saw the diminishing returns in the Academy Awards. So when you get a film like Wicked and you divide it in what I guess seems, I mean, they're proclaiming that it's because you have to be, just to be as faithful as possible. We just cannot do one movie. I still remember that tweet by John M. Chu, or that official statement by John M. Chu saying, we had to split them because that's the best for the project, because that's the only way we can be fiercely loyal to the project. And from the very beginning, that sounded unnecessary. It sounded protracted. It sounded sketchy. It sounded, let's call it what it is, and we're going to get into this topic as we keep talking about Wicked, greedy.
That's a big
it sounded greedy. And so, and also the fact that, when we're talking about Dune, it takes a master filmmaker like Denis Villeneuve to make that work. Under the hands of a different filmmaker, maybe a filmmaker that's not as visionary as Denis Villeneuve, maybe we would have seen kind of what we've been seeing now with Wicked Part 2 happen with the Dune movies. It just so happens that at the helm, we have Denis Villeneuve sort of, guiding it.
Even though I will say that, like, again, just to remind listeners, Wicked is one idea. It's one Broadway play. They didn't split the Broadway play into multiple nights that you have to come in. You come in and
Right.
you watch the show entirely. But you could argue that the Dune text is more sound because people who have seen the original Broadway play, of which I haven't, and I don't think you have either,
Right.
right?
No.
Some people do complain that in and of itself, it's a difficult text to cut into two movies because the part that you left over for the second movie is not as sound as
That's
that
the first
part.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's unanimous among even Wicked loyalists and fans that the first act of the show is much stronger than the second act.
And so Denis Villeneuve maybe has the foresight to say, well, that the part of Dune that I'm leaving to tackle in the following film will be able to stand on its own 2 feet.
Right.
And that was certainly, so far a miscalculation in
Right.
terms of the Wicked for
Right.
Good team.
Right. So it worked out for Dune, but even when it did, there were still diminishing returns.
Yeah.
So I never bought this idea that somehow this Wicked was going to repeat the noms or get close to the noms. That to me sounded, I mean, we'd have to be seeing like, a masterpiece level kind of thing.
Right.
And let's be honest, for as many fans as the first Wicked had, it had a lot of criticism, had a lot of judgment from top critics as
Right.
well. It was not regarded as one of the top 3 best films of the year by critics at large, top 10 list and whatnot.
Right.
It did really well at the Academy Awards, and it certainly had a huge box office moment, huge fanfare, huge pop culture moment. All that is true. But we're not talking about something that to begin with was, critically 100% sound. We're talking 80s and 90s on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes is a different thing. So the foundation already was, good, surprising, but not perfect.
Right.
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 And so when we're going to split this movie into 2 and the second act is destined to be much weaker, just based on the source material. And then this happens where the film underperforms critically. It's a 68 as we speak on Rotten Tomatoes. The first one I think is like 90 something on Rotten Tomatoes. And again, that's Rotten Tomatoes, which, allows for a lot of reviews, an aggregate of reviews from not just top critics, but just, anybody who, is an approved critic by Rotten Tomatoes standards.
Leans more positive as well.
Exactly. So, you tend to have like 10 to 15 points higher on Tomatoes than you do on Metacritic, which only counts established, prolific, a well-regarded critics from high publications.
Right.
On there, it's a 58.
Right.
And the first one was a surprising, I think, 73, which is a pretty good score.
Yeah. Which
So-
I don't think anyone expected.
Right. So we're talking about big drops here.
Mhm.
Nowhere near, catastrophe level, it's critically maligned. You can't say that, but we can certainly say it's it disappointed critically,
Right.
without a doubt. Obviously, it made a bunch of money. That was to be expected. So on that,
It did well, yeah.
yeah, I guess on that level, we can say that for Universal, they kind of got part of what they wanted,
Yeah.
because this strategy ended up working for them,
Yeah.
because the second one is even bigger than the first one,
Mhm.
off the heels of the big success that was the first one. So in that sense, I think Universal is happy.
I mean,
Can we say?
I think I would agree with you. They are happy. It's certainly so far a critical loss. It's a monetary gain for them. But I would also go further and say that, very few, if any, fans of Wicked, the sort of show and the property, the artistic property, the creative property, very few of the fans, not the critics, very few of the fans are going to take part 2 over part 1.
Right.
So in that sense, it's yet a kind of a little bit of a loss as well, right? For
Right.
Universal, not just critics, but, fans. Fans are not necessarily as disappointed as critics are. And I'm sure that there are some that are happy, but I do think that from what I've discussed with people who have seen both films, I do think pretty unanimously it just is not as good
It's a
as
step down.
Wicked.
It's a step down,
yeah.
even for people who quite like it.
And some people again do, credit that to the idea that the second part was always much weaker on like in a story sense.
Right.
But nonetheless, you didn't have to split it into two movies.
Right. And I think that Universal, at least on a critical level, and I think you and I are going to be so bold as to say on an awards level as well, when it comes to the Academy Awards, I think they're going to sort of reap what they sow with the sort of kind of greedy approach that they had.
Yeah.
I think the film will absolutely get much less nominations than the first did. I think we've seen the film and we're going to talk a little bit about our opinion and also about its awards prospect. But I'll just say to begin off the top, I expect it to get much less nominations. I expect it to not be nominated for Best Picture. It's not going to make any gains in director or screenplay, which it missed last time. And you and I feel very adamant that Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande will miss and not be nominated for acting. So I think the film will be absent above the line. I think we're looking at below the line. And I think I'm even being a little bit more skittish about how much below the line. So I would take it out of editing, which it got last year. I would take it out of score, which it made a surprising nomination there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing right now where I feel comfortable. I'm seeing production design, costume design, and makeup and hairstyling, and possibly an original song. The one that everyone is claiming is probably the best option for them, which is Girl in the Bubble. Right. And I'm seeing those 4 nominations where what it can comfortably count on. And I'm not seeing right now the pieces falling in such a way where the film can count on more than that. In fact, I think there's a reality where it has a shocking miss either in song or has a shocking miss in makeup or production design, a la the shocking misses of Dune Part 2, which had no reason to miss costume. It had no reason to miss makeup and hairstyling, and it still missed those nominations.
I mean, suffice it to say that everything that a lot of established pundits were saying 3 weeks out has totally sort of collapsed below them, right? That the floor has fallen through on those theories, in my opinion. And we've always had that idea that diminishing returns is the pattern within the Academy. And so there's no surprise there. But I do think after seeing the film and, having an awards profile on it, I do agree with you. We're at a point where the film has to campaign really well to hold on to the handful of nominations that it can still hold on to. And I certainly think that, the where it stands right now, it's going to be very difficult for it to go above the line. I think, nothing is impossible, but the board shrinks. I cannot see it going above the line. Even with making a lot of money, I think it's going to be interesting. And I think we'll allude to this as we discuss it, but so much of the fate of this movie will fall into the hands of what happens mid-December with Avatar. So much of it will be at stake with the release with the release that Disney has for that film, and how well or poorly it does in comparison to this one. Right. Because I do think that no matter what, we need a big, massive Hollywood film that, half of the industry was invested in. And so right now, on paper, sight unseen, Avatar looks like the better bet. Even if for 7 months of the year, it looked like Wicked was the better bet. I do think, the floor has fallen through a little bit in that theory. And just if Avatar can manage to match Way of Water or exceed Way of Water in terms of money, in terms of critics, in terms of general audience appeal, it is certainly going to be in a stronger position. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I think that people are still in that, sort of the honeymoon phase of, okay, well, it disappointed. But, we can still count on it, to get text and maybe Best Picture or text and maybe acting. And I'm trying to be a little stricter and saying this is purely a tech movie. And I'm not trying to be, overly aggressive when I say that you have to campaign really well to keep these texts, because you said like a score nomination is difficult to come for any musical.
Right.
And the fact that it got one last year speaks volumes to how successful they campaigned and how successful that film was and how appealing it was to voters and to general audiences.
Right.
That's off the table, in my opinion.
Right.
And there are opportunities here to reap a nomination, but they're not secure. Some people have knocked the production design. People are knocking the makeup. People are knocking the visual effects. And so these are not givens anymore. And so to have a musical last year score nominations in original score, in visual effects, all those were massive things. And I'm not as confident that it'll be able to repeat even those things. If you get if Ann Lee comes out in December and all of a sudden it finds an audience, this movie's going to have problems, getting some of those categories that you would think are done deals.
Right. I mean, I wish we lived in a universe where a film like Ann Lee could have the fanfare and the sort of cultural pop culture movement that, Wicked undoubtedly has.
Right.
I think, but because I think it's one of the best films of the year. We've talked about it.
And I think, and I enjoy the film. Yeah, I enjoy the film just fine. And I really admire it. And I'm not saying that it will have that fanfare, but God forbid if it does, the nominations are going to drop even more.
Right. But here's something that I thought about when you were speaking was, again, if we take stock of the Academy history, there aren't many sequels that get nominated for Best Picture to begin with. Mm-hmm. But now if I have to nitpick and look at films that were, let's just say, 58 on Metacritic, sequels that are 58, let's take the sequel part out of it, films that are 58 on Metacritic, that's a low that's a low number of films that can get in with such a low Metacritic score. So what comes to mind is certainly Don't Look Up, which is not a sequel.
Oh wow!
And it is a poorly received film. It's in the yellows in Metacritic. Okay, but it's a director that they clearly like, who's been nominated for Best Director before, and who's been nominated for writing as well.
Who's a winner also.
Right, he's a winner. So he is able to get his, and Netflix behind it is able to get that film into the top 10.
Right. He also has Netflix, Meryl, Leo,
of course,
Jennifer Lawrence, and quote unquote importance.
Right. Right. But my point with that is that if we even just looking at a 58 on Metacritic, the number of films that get into Best Picture with a 58 on Metacritic, it's a very low number. Mm-hmm. Now add to that it's a sequel. Mm-hmm. I think that is something that not enough people are paying attention to, at least people who still think that it has a shot at Best Picture. Now, I agree with you, the kind of tumultuous year that it is, I'm not sure that I see a list that excludes both a huge financial moment for Wicked and a huge financial moment possibly for Avatar to be excluded from the Best Picture list.
Right.
But in a way, I wonder if Avatar also is in the 50s. Let's just say, worst case scenario, it's in the 50s, right? Let's just say. I don't know. I'm not sure that I would picture voters saying, well, you know what? I have to nominate one of these 50s. Number one, because, Wicked is not James Cameron. And number two, James Cameron has already been here for this project twice in Best Picture. Right. So I'm not really sure that I think...
And he's going to keep making them.
Exactly. So I think in a way, I think that even if Avatar doesn't end up being, better than Wicked, and let's just say worst case, it's as good as Wicked, in the 60s on Metacritic and in the 50s in the 50s on Metacritic and the 60s on Rotten Tomatoes, I'm still not sure that they wouldn't rather welcome a different film that they consider this is a better film. And so I want to highlight it in Best Picture, even if it's not a huge box office success.
I understand that point of view, but I will nitpick at it a little bit in the sense that there are branches within the Academy that have very little creative stake in a film, whether it's publicists, executives, marketing individuals, they also get a vote. And so as long as they get a vote, it's very difficult for me to think that you're not going to have some substantial financial successes get into that Best Picture. The Academy is still a business, and they need to sell eyeballs on the screen the same way that movie theaters need to sell butts in seats. And so if you have a lineup that includes Sorry Baby, then a lot of people are going to feel like we failed to do the job that we're supposed to do. I'm not me. I will celebrate that nomination. Right. But that being the case, could I see Avatar being similarly 55 and missing? I could, but then I would argue the spot opens up for F1 to get in. The spot opens up for Weapons to get in. We already have Sinners, which is great. And that's what they want. They want original films that speak to massive amounts of audience that sort of are emblematic for what happens when you have creativity operating at its peak. Audiences will listen.
Right.
And everyone wins there, you know? And so we already have Sinners, which is great. Unfortunately, Frankenstein was a streaming movie, so that's not the best case scenario. But if the case happens where both Avatar and Wicked are just too critically maligned or critically marginal to get in, I would expect a comeback for F1 or Weapons or other big movies like that.
Right. No, that makes sense. And so starting to talk a little bit. Well, so that pissed me off. Like, it pissed me off to get, you know, I guess I'm not going to name names. I'll just name publications and little, you know, presences on Twitter, you know, already getting their first peek and saying, oh, that's it, guys. It's over. It's going to get this and this and this and this and this. And then it comes out and you give me a 58 on Metacritic.
That's not a good strategy.
That really bothers me. Like, you know, what is this? Either these people that are being welcomed to screen it, you know, have their first eyeballs on it, are lying to you. They're lying to your face.
Right.
Or they're just not good. They're not good at detecting, you know, what's good quality or not. Because, for example, like, you know, and I don't mean to be, again, impolite, but if you had asked me, you know, come and see this second Wicked, and I'm not a fan of the first one, and I saw the second one, I don't think I could have come out of that screening saying, oh, wow, get ready. You know, because to me, it's so blatantly obvious that this film is a step down from the first one. And again, you're talking to someone that doesn't like the first one that much. But the step down in quality is undisputable.
I absolutely agree. But I will say that having had the experience of watching the first one, I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but I will say it's an enjoyable movie. And I will say that there are a lot of things that it gets right. And I will say that part of, I suppose, the job is being able to read the film on screen and then read the room. And when you're one of the select few to watch it at a very exclusive screening, maybe it gets difficult to read the room. You know, sometimes the same thing happens at a festival. When you watch a festival and it's an amazing film and you're watching it there with the audience for the first time and everyone's going crazy for it. And then months pass and it just doesn't resonate with the rest of the general movie-going public. That happens. And so maybe you can't read the room, but part of your job is also to read the movie. And so if you read the movie, I don't think there's any way that you can read the movie of Wicked for Good and say they got the same amount of things right. They executed at the same level. That just is, I think, factually wrong.
Right. And jumping off of that, I will say, like I said, I wasn't crazy about the first one. I find a lot of problems with it. I'll just say, you know, I did find that it was bloated. I questioned why we had to split it. The film kind of functions in a weird way. I think David Ehrlich said that at some point it feels like it's a film about, you know, finding your broom or something like that, to that effect. And it's this idea that, you know, because the film is split into two, narratively, it doesn't feel as sound. It kind of feels a film that's really focused on friends to enemies, frenemies kind of thing. Yes. I thought there was a sort of juvenile aspect to that.
Yes.
That sure can be, you know, charming enough or, you know, silly enough. It's a popcorn confection, you know, that, you know, you can just watch, I guess. And it's not really, it's just, you know, you can watch it and it's fine. But it's not, I didn't personally find it very profound or very dimensional. But I understood why people liked it. You know, it certainly ends on a high note. You know, Defying Gravity is a jam.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone agrees it's the jam of that show. You know, and so I certainly had problems with, you know, some of the text and, you know, I certainly didn't think it's a film that needed to get an eye for 10 Academy Award nominations, but at least I understood, you know, the fanfare of it all.
Right.
Jumping off from there into this one, I still thought that it was a film that was very bloated. I thought it was patchy. I thought it was messy. Worst of all, I thought that it was boring. You know, me, the film was
tedious,
very tedious. And weirdly enough, also felt rushed. People have been talking about that in the sense that, you know, they had to get through a lot of things, it seems.
I told you something like that at the end. I said, so we went from a movie that's like 2 hours and 40 to a movie that's only 2 hours and 20. And this feels like a 3 hour 20 movie where like
Right.
a lot of things supposedly happened and emotionally nothing happened.
Right. Exactly. And, there's underdeveloped character arcs, the character Nessa, goes
Oh,
through this arc that's kind of, feels really, really rushed. And the same can be said about almost all the characters. Tin Man, um,
right.
uh, you know,
Oh, yeah.
there wasn't certainly an improvement on the visuals side. People had a lot of criticism about the visuals.
Hmm.
But I would say that for me, I actually thought that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because we're dealing with a little bit more darker themes, but for some reason to me, it looked even more stale than the first one. Maybe it's just that dramatically it felt a little bit inert.
Like visually, it looked more
Right.
stale.
Or just like there was a lot of like CGI slop,
Hmm.
in key moments or just throughout that I thought weren't adding anything to those moments. Um, Again, I think that you can see this film and say that the split was justified, or that the split was anything other than this gamble to make as much money as possible,
Right.
which I think really dilutes the entirety of the thing. Because it just feels so obvious.
I mean,
Um,
I will say that I agree with the majority of what you're saying, but it's also kind of sad. Like, I watched the first one, and to me, it's good popcorn. It's a good popcorn. I don't think it's one of the best pictures of the year, but good popcorn, and good popcorn gets nominated for all kinds of Oscars. I'm not a fan at all of Top Gun Maverick. I mean, Tom Cruise, we had to do an hour and a half just for Tom Cruise to be able to save the day. He couldn't save it like 20 minutes into the movie. I don't understand it, but whatever. Good popcorn gets nominated, and aerial sequences, beautiful. You can't come out of Wicked Part 1 and not try to belt out the song on your way to the car. Like, you have to do that because the song is that good.
Yeah.
And Cynthia's performance of the song is that good.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly it's more successful in what it does, and it's also more surprising because the bar has already been it's kind of low, and so it does surprise you. I think there's more joy in it. And I think I remember telling you, like, yeah, because we had read the whole, it's about a witch who finally gets her broom, whatever. I kind of told you that, like, the movie's over. Like, I don't need to see a part 2. She got the broom. I'm happy. The song was great. The cape multiplied into 10 times the size that when it was on the ground. I guess whatever. It makes sense in the movie, I guess. But I didn't need a part 2. And so that's one of the saddest things about it. I agree with so many of your criticisms. I felt the same way. It's rushed. It's slapdash. I kind of told you, like, it feels like an outline that was filmed in outline form, and just very quickly we got to get to the next moment in the outline. We got to get to the next moment with very little connective tissue between moments, between characters. It's also like very isolated. Like, the story has spread out in such a way where we're putting one or two characters together. Some characters are completely alone. But again, there's no actual connection between them. So, like, whatever's going on between Ariana Grande and Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum, there's no emotional connection there. Whatever's going on between Nessa and the other character who's going to end up
Tin Man.
Tin Man, there's very little emotional connection there for me. Whatever's going on between Tin Man and Ariana Grande, very little emotional connection. And so it's also, like, really sad because they did so much work to make the first one function and be memorable and be a good popcorn film, that this second one undoes so much of that. And you talk about greed. I think that's a major theme here, because I can only imagine, it being a stronger project had they been fused together and had made, maybe find a reasonably 3 hours, 15 movie, and had been a little bit more discerning and a little bit more structured. I think you could have made a film that had been exciting enough. Like, you would have had 3/4 of a film that was great, and then you got to finish the story quickly enough in the last quarter. And people are going to forgive that because the first 3/4 are really entertaining. And so, like, it's really disappointing and kind of, sad, because you could have seen the entire version of Wicked giving Nora a run for its money, because it could have made good money, possibly still had really good critics or strong enough critics. And it could have just been, again, appealing enough, in a sort of Crash way, which again,
Right.
I like Crash, but people knock it for all the problems it has, but it can still win. Right. And so I don't doubt that might have happened. Same thing with Dune. Like, had you fused those two movies together, you would have given Coda and Power of the Dog a run for their money. But that greed sort of bit you in the butt at the end.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I don't know that I personally agree that even if they had made one Wicked, it would have, won Best Picture, just because I think Best Picture now has to be, the win has to mean something, I think, more profound than I think the slight political allegory that's going on in Wicked might. But I certainly think that it would have gotten as many nominations as it did, or maybe even more. And certain categories, maybe some of the acting categories, maybe some of the other tech categories, I think would have been in stronger contention to win those categories. I 100% agree with you. So what they're left with now is, just a shell of what could have been, as you were saying, if they had had the guts and the confidence and the, not greed, to make one piece.
Right.
I think all parties involved, I think, would have been happy with that. I think,
Yeah.
certainly on an awards perspective.
Yeah.
But so I'll also say that, the songs aren't as memorable here as in the first one, but I don't really give it flack for that. I can understand that the first show has the more memorable songs. That's fine.
I can't remember one tune out of this one. I can't. I mean, I remember one, but I kind of told you, like, it's the most damning part of the film.
Oh, yes. Well, of course.
And I will, yeah.
Right. We'll talk about that right now. They added a few songs. I didn't think necessarily that those songs were, incredible songs to add. I think they added just more to the package, which just gives more credence to this idea that you're just trying to fluff it out to make an entire film,
right?
Of a part two that doesn't need to be an entire film. So certainly the Cynthia Erivo song I thought was not good. And the way it was staged was terrible.
That's below her.
And then the Ariana Grande song, Girl in the Bubble, I thought was just okay.
The better of the two.
The better of the two, certainly, but, nowhere near, I guess, the memorable song she had in Popular.
And they kind of had, like, again, with, like, the Popular number, like, whenever they sort of film Ariana Grande, they sometimes have, like, a better concept for how to do it, because the way they staged Girl with the Bubble is so much better than the way they staged Cynthia Erivo's song. And it's kind of like, why the hell did you give her a song for that?
And I think that's something I'm going to come back to, because I really want us to talk about it. But I also wanted to talk about, well, let's just get into, like, some of the specific stuff. Hopefully we're not spoiling for anybody, and if we are, just fast forward some of these moments. But I think they're worth mentioning. Some of the decisions that the film made. Certainly all of the Dorothy stuff, all of the Wizard of Oz stuff is really, I thought, sloppily done.
It was terrible.
It was bad, man. Almost all of the Wizard of Oz stuff is bad.
Yeah.
Not okay, not so bad.
And I think it's because I think they're trying to stay true to the Broadway musical and the way they handled it there, but they should have taken advantage that they were a film.
Exactly.
And then the property has such a stronger film legacy, and really played around with it.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, and at the risk of spoiling some stuff, so just some
spoilers. This is the spoiler section.
But that moment at the end, we talked about it. When the film decides to focus on Ariana Grande, and again, I'm going to go back to that because I want to speak more on that. When the film decides to focus on Ariana Grande looking through a sliver of the door to see the final action moment between Dorothy,
right,
and Cynthia Erivo's character, the witch melting, all that stuff. I didn't like that.
It sucked.
I thought it was really poor.
Yeah.
But you had said something very interesting.
I kind of said after I saw the film that it was really disappointing, because there's one moment in the film that is so damning, damning to everything in it. And that is, aside from someone who enjoyed, the reimagining of Wizard of Oz in Wicked 1, I'm not familiar with the play at all, with the musical at all.
Right.
And so just, getting back into the world of Oz and seeing the reinterpretation, that sort of, got my creative juices flowing, and piqued my interest. You kind of throw it away with everything they do with Dorothy and some of the original characters here. And they're just sort of referenced and awkwardly integrated and whatever. But there's one absolutely damning moment in this movie. And I say this as a person who, again, enjoyed the good popcorn and has no stake whatsoever in the musical or the Broadway property. But the only moment in the movie that I think ever comes close to working is the moment where Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are singing together.
Right.
And they're sharing the same space, they're sharing the same emotional space, and they're bringing out of each other the best that their performances can give. And it's such a damning moment for the movie because it's at that moment that you realize how poor this movie is compared to the first one.
Right.
You realize that the film is aware that that is its strength, that that's sort of where the magic of the entire thing lies, is that one musical moment they share towards that ending scene of the one you're referring to. And yet it's nowhere in the second movie but in that one scene.
Right.
And so, like, there's nothing worse than experiencing a movie where you have just a tiny little bit of hope and a tiny little bit of magic to remind you how unspectacular the rest of it is.
Right.
And so to me, it is, the best part of the movie, but it's also the part of the movie that just reminds you of how disappointed you are with the rest of the movie.
Right. And of course, you're talking about When They Sing For Good, which is undoubtedly the most memorable song of the piece.
And that's the only tune that I can sort of remember.
Right. And it's a very moving piece, and it's sung very beautifully by both of them. But yeah, you're 100% right. And I think this made me think of something right now, which is that, one of my biggest criticisms for this film is that, to me, even though it's a continuation, it's a part 2 of a Broadway show, it feels so much like a sequel.
I know.
It feels like, okay, we were done with we did the original film, but now the fans are clamoring for more. So let's see what we can do to make this like a new movie. Let's put some of this in here and some of that in here, and let's do some of this, and let's give them some of this. And so then we're going to make the sequel, and then you watch the sequel, and it's just, a huge step down from the original, and it's nothing compared to the original. And it had that energy about it.
Mm-hmm.
It had this energy of like this big sequel energy,
yeah,
which is not what you want from a part 2 continuation of a Broadway show, right? But
right.
You felt that way too, right?
Yeah, I did feel that way. And, also just some of the story development was sort of like we're going backward when supposedly some things were solved. Like I remember, and I told you, like, I don't understand Elphaba's energy in this film at all. Like, to me, from the first frame, she reads as defeated. Right. You know what I mean? And sort of like drawn in. And she was just like soaring in the last one. And I expected her to come in here and just like be a boss and be so combative and sort of like make me think that, the Wicked Witch of the West or whatever, she's not evil. She's just passionate, and she understands what the right thing to do is. She's committed to doing the right thing.
Right.
But every time that she's in this movie, it almost feels like she's just defeated and she's like deflated.
Right.
And so where did all of that, confidence and power go to that we ended on in the first film? You know what I mean? So to me, there's this whole energy of the film where like we're going backward we're going in a backward energy to where we came from. You know what I mean? Where she was sort of cowering in the beginning of the film of Wicked 1 to you get that climactic moment, and now we're back in that same energy. It's not her building off of that power. It's well, in order to make this movie work, we have to get her back. We have to get her back into sort of an emotional box.
Right, exactly. But back to what you were saying, after that For Good musical sequence, we have the ending where Ariana Grande is looking through a sliver door, and you're seeing the shadows of the destruction of the witch.
Yeah.
Which is probably, you think it's similar to the way it was done on the Broadway show? I know your criticism.
I think it is.
Because your criticism was, well, you have a film here. Why would you not take the advantage and use all the tools at your disposal to show a cinematic moment of that nature?
Not just that, but also like we're revising. We're revisionists now. Right. X amount of years have happened. We're going to go ahead and revise history. And that's exciting and that's interesting. And Quentin Tarantino killed Hitler in Inglourious Bastards. You can revise it. You don't have to like say, well, Hitler never died. You know, Quentin Tarantino just wakes up one night and writes down, and he just dies, you know? And it's a brilliant moment, right? That's why we make movies, right?
Right.
So I just feel like we have this text that's revising Wizard of Oz and revising the original literary property, which again, I'm not too familiar with, but I know I've read parts of the Wizard of Oz text that the original 39 film is based on. But we didn't make the commitment of making the death scene different or changing it altogether. You could have had the Wicked Witch kill Dorothy if you really wanted to. So to me, it was not just was it staged poorly and staged as if it was in a theater as opposed to a cinema, but it also didn't have the, again, combatic, anarchistic spirit of cinema that sort of said, you know, I'm going to make it my own. The same way that cape, it doesn't make sense for the cape at the end of the film in part 1 to grow 10 times as big as it was on the ground. Like, it doesn't make sense what kind of cape that is. But, you know, screw the rules. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that was incredibly frustrating.
Right. And that scene that I mentioned is very interesting and frustrating for me because I think it epitomizes something that I've had a problem with throughout this entire Wicked journey, which is, okay, this is a moment where a very, climactic thing is happening, but the focus is on Glinda and Glinda's emotional response. And I guess I can understand the creative interest in, okay, why don't we do something different? Possibly. I don't know, again, if that's how it's done on the Broadway show, but it brings to the forefront a bigger issue that I have with this movie, which is that to me, watching it, and I don't know how many people feel like I do, as I know we certainly share that opinion, but watching it, it feels like this film was sometimes prioritizing Glinda and her character and her journey more than it was prioritizing Elphabas.
Yeah.
And it feels like the original DNA of this project is Elphabas' story, that she sort of epitomizes Wicked. It's not necessarily the Glinda story, it's the Elphaba story, and Glinda is a part of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. But in the first one, to you and to me, it felt like a lot of, subliminally, it felt like a lot of the movie was shooting for Ariana Grande's character, and prioritizing her. Again, it was subtle, it was subliminal, but it felt like that character was being prioritized visually, cinematically, thematically, more than Cynthia Erivo's character was.
Right.
And that didn't sit well with me, not only because the film already made a very interesting and profound choice in casting a black actress of Cynthia Erivo's stature to play Elphaba. Mm-hmm. And I think, I think that was intentional, and I thought it was effective. But also because you're undercutting what the story is, which is Elphaba. Elphaba's the story, not Glinda. And so that becomes times 10 in this part too.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer subliminal, but now it's full-fledged obvious.
That's what I was exactly going to say, was that we had talked about that idea that in part 1, John M. Chu, the success of Ariana Grande's performance is just as much good casting as John M. Chu is doing everything he can to sort of shoot around her and edit around her and make her look as good as she is in that film. And to a certain degree, in doing that, you can sort of see that there's a little bit more work done to give Glinda's character that stage than Elphaba's. But Elphaba, at the same time, as a character, she's, she doesn't want to be noticed, she wants to be undetected. And so at a certain, she's, just sneaking around and sort of, in a corner until she completely possesses the movie. Right. But again, John M. Chu knows how to frame that to sort of keep her sort of, trying to, be in the shadows a little bit until she takes complete dominion of the film. And so he stages her perfectly. And Cynthia Erivo has such a caliber a caliber of performance that she's able to sort of like rip the movie away
Right.
with just a look, with just a gesture, with
Right.
just a little bit of movement. And the problem is that in this film, we had discussed it, it's no longer subliminal.
Right.
Like the actual narrative of Elphaba has been given
The
what
backseat.
feels like the backseat to the narrative of Glinda. And I
Yeah.
think the moment that you were talking about, the sliver in the door, cements that.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually to the detriment of the movie. And I don't think that it helps that in this movie, John M. Chu had no idea how to frame Cynthia Erivo. Because like I said, from frame one, she's not the same character that left Wicked 1. You know
Right,
what I mean?
right.
So I don't think he did any good framing for her whatsoever, any good positioning her in the film whatsoever. But then also there's just this awkwardness because you would think as a revisionist text that it's going to focus more on Elphaba. And so Wicked 1 starts with Glinda coming down in the bubble, right? And everyone's singing
Right.
the song about, no one mourns the wicked, right? And you could think that, Glinda is the movie, but then Elphaba really takes possession of it. Here, it doesn't feel like Elphaba ever really takes possession of it.
Right,
it feels like it's kind of Glinda's story, and Glinda even becomes the more active character
Right,
after that sliver scene.
Right.
And I thought, as I told you, like the amount of suspension of disbelief you have to have in this movie for all of a sudden, that to snap her into being the more active character is just, again, it was too much for me to believe. And I didn't think it was credible. But so it becomes really awkward. And to a point where I think people have even talked about how much screen time each of them has. And they were pretty close in that first one. And I think in this one, they have to be dead even at the least.
Or possibly Grande has a little bit more.
Grande may surpass Cynthia Erivo by a little bit, but sort of like they had that co-lead energy in part one. I don't think there's any question, at least not to me, that they're kind of co-leads in this movie.
Right. Right.
And that there are just huge chunks of this movie where I want to see Cynthia Erivo that I did not get a chance to see.
Right. But like I said, like the reason that, for all the reasons you just stated, that was very frustrating for me because I don't know if we were alone in thinking that, but also it made me feel like Universal understood we have this very talented musician in this part. I want this to be a big selling point.
Right.
As opposed to Cynthia Erivo, who's a very talented actor.
Right.
And a very incredible vocalist.
Right.
It's sort of like, she's not going to put the butts in seats.
Right.
The butts in seats is going to come from
the megastar, right?
The franchise. And in this particular case, the megastar is the pop star,
right?
Ariana Grande. And so, in a way, I didn't feel like any of these two films, and certainly not the second one, could escape that feeling from me, that nudging feeling that, this was more of a priority than necessarily Elphaba's story or Cynthia Erivo's character or Cynthia Erivo's performance as Elphaba. Something about this experience watching these two movies that nudged at me, that bothered me. Right. Like I said, I think in the first one, she's so Cynthia Erivo is so powerful in her vocals and her acting. That she's able to sort of transcend that, overcome that. And here, this just, you just can't because the material is just not there. It's non-existent. But I haven't seen enough people talk about that, but that's certainly something that bothered me. I don't know. And I think we feel similarly.
No, I definitely feel that way. And I think, again, it's to a huge detriment of the movie. I will say, again, I'm not familiar with the Broadway property, but I will know as someone who is not familiar with the Broadway property, it was incredibly frustrating not to have Cynthia Erivo's point of view towards the end of that movie.
Right.
To have so much of it come from Glinda's point of view was really frustrating. And again, it just, to me, it sort of silences the most interesting aspect of the movie, right? Because I think undoubtedly, if we're going to make a movie or a project like Wicked that tries to revise the theory of something, I think the biggest revision is Elphaba's, right? We've even given her a name, right? I don't think she was ever called Elphaba in The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
But Glinda the Good was always Glinda the Good.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's something that was incredibly disappointing and detrimental.
But I think you bring up a really good word when you say revisionist, because again, as someone who's not very familiar with the Broadway show, the piece itself feels like it's a revisionist story on what you thought was the Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
This world that you think, is black and white, this witch is evil, but really no, it's the opposite of what you think. It's much more deep, it's much more profound, it's much more dimensional than you would think. I think that is in a nutshell, what the story of Wicked is supposed to be. Right?
What it's trying to be.
Exactly. So it's something that always bothered me, and I didn't hear enough people talking about it, but I don't know if we're the only ones who felt that way.
I definitely felt that way, and I'm sure, I haven't spoken to anyone, but again, there are people who are familiar with the original project. But I think that if you're familiar with the Broadway show, and what you're sort of telling me is that there's this whole symbiosis going on between them, and that, having Elphaba's perspective sort of disappear at the end is okay because it's sort of living through this new perspective that Glinda has.
The film didn't
give that to me. I just did not get that from the film.
Right.
Again, I think part of it is that John M. Chu, unfortunately, was not assertive enough in revising the Broadway property. And that, again, he just didn't frame. I don't think he ever framed Elphaba well throughout the second part.
Right. 100%. And so jumping off of there, when we look at awards prospects, we've talked a lot about picture. And I certainly think that with this weaker second iteration, if it couldn't manage a best director or best screenplay nomination, which in and of itself, for example, a best screenplay nomination for a musical is incredibly difficult, even though Amelia Perez was able to do it last year. That's very rare. It's very, very rare.
Yeah.
So if it couldn't do it for part one, it's not doing it for part two.
Right.
So take out director and take out screenplay as well.
It will not add those.
Right. And so then we're looking at two very interesting categories that people have talked a lot about. And I think you and I have a lot of thoughts about, and that's Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress, which again, in this case seems a little weird because Ariana Grande is not a supporting actor here. At the very least a co-lead, but we'll touch more upon that.
You could run them both lead, and I don't think anyone's gonna really complain. I think that, the running time speaks for itself.
Right. And so we look at actress. Okay. The important thing to remember about Best Actress is that Cynthia Erivo is already a 3-time Academy Award nominee. And 2 of those nominations are for acting. One of them is for her contributions to an original song for Harriet. This would be her 3rd nomination. All of her nominations have been in the lead actress category. In 2019, Harriet. In last year, 2024, for Wicked. And now would be for Wicked Part 2. Number one, it's very, very, very difficult, very rare for an actor to have 3 back-to-back nominations in the lead category.
Meaning like that they aren't broken up by a nomination in supporting actor.
Right, like there's no category shift.
Yeah.
And for them to have those, for example, 3 lead acting nominations and never win for any of those first 3 acting nominations.
Right. And to be fair, it's not impossible. Like, for example, we've talked about it, like Carey Mulligan was able to do it.
Right.
When she went from An Education to Promising Woman and Maestro. I think the more damning thing here, is time. Right. Because how much time passes between Mulligan's nomination for An Education and Mulligan's nomination for Promising Young Woman.
Right.
You know what I mean?
10 years, almost 10.
Exactly.
11 years.
Exactly. And so the idea, I think that's more problematic for Cynthia is not just, is it rare for an actor to go 3 times into a Best Actress nomination without a nomination supporting. You look at someone like Viola Davis, for example, who bounces between lead and supporting all the time and has a supporting Oscar and will get a lead Oscar in the future. It's uncommon for an actor to go 3 in a row in lead. What's worse is an actor to go 3 in a row, the second and third of which are actually
the same property, the same film,
the same property. And I was also going to say consecutive,
right? Because
that's insane.
Yeah, that's extremely rare. I don't know if it's ever happened actually, where their second and third nominations happen back to back. I will say that things change a little bit if that actor is for example, having those consecutive lead nominations and they're going to a win or they're coming from a win.
Right.
So, for example, Carey Mulligan was one of the rare cases that was able to do it in the sense that she wasn't coming from a win and she wasn't going to a win either. She was still able to do it.
They weren't consecutive though.
Yeah, they weren't consecutive. They weren't the same film. They were different characters. Let's say
completely different characters.
Yes, really. And also the third one, and I even believe she was playing two real life figures for An Education. I believe was based on a real life.
Yeah.
And then Maestro, she's playing a real life figure as well. But the point is, it's very rare to get consecutive nominations in the lead category, and you're not even going to a win or coming from a win.
Yeah.
And because Cynthia Erivo will not be winning for this movie because it's just not strong enough,
right?
And because, of course, as people have already said, she has it's a very competitive Best Actress category this year with Jessie Buckley there,
right?
It makes her possibilities of getting that third nomination in lead actress that would be a back-to-back nomination from her last nomination last year for the same property very unlikely.
Yeah.
And so I think some people are still thinking, well, you know what? She's going to win the Golden Globe. You know, she might go on to at least get a nomination for her work in both films, all that stuff, which again, I dispute. But regardless, I just think it's too big of a hill to climb for Cynthia Erivo to get that third nomination.
Right.
I will say that things would have been different if she was going to win for this movie and the film was strong enough.
Oh yeah.
And she was the designated front runner, Best Actress winner. Okay, then she's actually going to a win, so it makes sense.
So exactly. So if the film could match critically what the first one did, then I do think you can make the argument that Cynthia Erivo is going to be the biggest competition for Jessie Buckley. And that it could be a back-to-back nomination for the same property because, as you said, she's going to a win.
Right.
I just don't think that's in the cards anymore because the film, no matter what, is just not as good as the first one.
Right.
And so it's tough for me to imagine any voter ever saying that this is the one that I want to give Cynthia Erivo an Oscar for.
Right.
I feel like most voters are going to know in their gut that she is going to have a better movie and a better performance.
Right.
And knowing that, they're not going to waste, her first win on this particular project.
Yeah, and I also, along that, I will say, as we've talked about several times on this podcast, you and I are firm believers, if we just look at the history of the Academy Awards, that they are paying attention to how many nominations an actor gets,
right.
how frequently they get those nominations. So they're aware that this would be Cynthia's third nomination,
right.
that it would be her third nomination in the lead category. So all those things, that I think some people take for granted that voters just aren't thinking about it. I think that voters are choosy about their actors that get more than one nomination.
Absolutely.
How often they get a nomination, how consecutive those nominations are.
There was no better demonstration on that than last year's Best Actress race when they said very clearly Pamela Anderson just does not have the career yet to get a nomination for The Last Showgirl. When they said very clearly Kate Winslet is a winner already and she's just not good enough in Lee, or Lee is just not good enough a movie for me to nominate her again. Angelina Jolie has 2 nominations already and an Oscar. And again, the project is just not good enough for me to put her in. Saoirse Ronan.
Or I'm not sure I want to give Angelina Jolie a third acting nomination.
Exactly. Saoirse Ronan is going to win an Oscar at some point.
Right.
And last year, she was excellent in both films.
Yeah.
And both films were solid films.
Yeah.
Solid to good, possibly to even very good, coming from Steve McQueen and Sony Picture Classics. And they very clearly said, I don't want to give Saoirse an Oscar for this yet. I'm going to wait for the undeniable Saoirse Ronan project, even if that means I'm going to give an Oscar to Mikey Madison first.
Right.
And so they are being extremely picky about when they nominate you again, because they know that, maybe it's an opportune moment to finally give you that win.
Right.
And so I cannot, it just doesn't make sense for that Academy to say, I'm going to nominate an actor, without a certain amount of discretion about how many times I'm going to give them that honor.
And there's an aspect to this that's, again, selective, it's choosy, and it's also sort of, who they like and who they don't like, or who they're willing to give that sort of platform and who they're not. So you put up a great example with Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie is an Oscar winner and she has 2 nominations, and they had the perfect opportunity last year to give her a 3rd nomination for Best Actress. But that to me, if you look at the history also, that to me just sort of displayed that their thinking was along the lines of, I'm not really sure I want to give Angelina Jolie a 3rd acting nomination just yet.
Right.
You know, I need to see more, or I need to see more diverse work, or this isn't the thing that I want to, you know, they have a class of actor. Like imagine that they have a little category of a class of actor that they consider worthy of multiple nominations.
Absolutely.
And then another class of actor where, you were in the right vehicle, it was the right moment, and of course you were welcomed with a nomination. But to get that 2nd nomination, to get that 3rd nomination, to get that 4th nomination, they're incredibly choosy about the kind of actor they bestow that upon.
Right.
You know, and all you have to do is just look at the history to see that those trends exist. Whether they do it conscientiously or they do it subconsciously, it's happened. It's there.
Yeah.
And so again, as we were saying, considering that Cynthia Erivo would get her 3rd lead acting back to back, it would be her 3rd would be a back to back from her 2nd
for the same property,
a film that's already that's clearly more poorly received than the first. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's just very difficult to do. I mean, people bring up Al Pacino for Michael Corleone. Okay.
Well, there was a category shift.
There was a category shift, and there was time in between. They were not consecutive. But I'll tell you what.
Well, he did get nominated. He did get nominated in between, I believe, for Serpico.
Yes, but not for the same character is what I mean.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, if that year of Serpico was also the year of Godfather Part 2, could you make the argument that Al Pacino would have gotten nominated consecutively for the Michael Corleone role? I think you can. Could you make the argument that had they promoted him to lead for The Godfather, which is where I think he wanted to be, Al Pacino for Michael Corleone and The Godfather 1, that they could have nominated consecutively, Part 1 and Part 2, Michael Corleone in the lead role, Al Pacino? Yes. Do I think that it matters that it's The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, two massive Best Picture winners? 100% I think it matters.
Yeah.
If The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 were,
okay,
whatever, then I do not think that they're going to be able to be that enthusiastic about committing that kind of history.
Right, 100%. And so that's where we're at with Cynthia Erivo. And then a very interesting prospect that some people feel convinced about is the supporting actress category with Ariana Grande. I will say, to the benefit of other people and not us, we did predict that Cynthia and Ariana would miss last year, and we were wrong, and they both got in, even though the prevailing popular thought was that they would get in. So it wasn't a shock that they got in. You and I were outliers in thinking that they wouldn't.
But we had fundamentally sound reasons.
We had sound reasoning. Okay, we had sound reasoning,
which now I hope people will catch on to even more. Right.
Well, I remember one of the reasons that we thought that was because we believed that the veteran spot in the Best Actress race, because as we've talked about previously, and as you'll see in our website, all these acting categories should at least have one veteran presence, an actor that's been there before, being included in the 5. We firmly believed that Marianne Jean-Baptiste would get that nomination for Best Actress for Hard Truths, especially after her trifecta win
with critics,
with NYFCC and LAFCA and National Film Critics. We firmly believed that she would have been the veteran presence, and we firmly believed that Ariana Grande, because she's so new to the film world and to acting, and because she's a musician, that she would need to get in with Cynthia Erivo. Right. That she wouldn't be able to get in by herself.
And that Daniel Deadwyler was still, it was still kind of outrageous that she wasn't nominated for Till, that she would be able to get in for the piano lesson. Which
with the category shift as well.
With the category shift, with the prestige of August Wilson, that all that would help.
Right.
Now, I will say we underestimated how much actors just do not understand or will not watch a Mike Leigh film, unfortunately. Which is, just
that was
speaks poorly on them.
Yeah.
But I will say that the other argument we had, last year, and that we sort of milked and sort of bit us in the butt at the end, but I think
blew up in our face.
It blew up in our face. But what's the saying? The Chickens Are Coming Home to Roost or whatever.
Right.
Why would they nominate them last year when they can just nominate them for the conclusion in part 2?
Right.
Okay, well, now the chickens have come home to roost.
Right.
Part 2 is not as good. There's every reason to not nominate them for it.
Right.
So sort of that idea that you and I had, which is maybe they can be nominated for it, but I don't think they'll be nominated twice. And why can't they just wait till the conclusion?
Right.
That makes sense.
Right. That was pivotal to our reasoning as well. Exactly. But I will say that when it comes to Ariana Grande, I certainly think that she had a more one-dimensional character in the first one that relied a lot on, gags that I didn't think were necessarily very difficult to perform, the hair tossing and some of the comedic
popular
relief.
song.
Yeah. Some of the hair tossing and some of the little, comedic gags, which again, I didn't feel were very difficult for her to perform. She has that great song. She's undoubtedly a very gifted, talented musician, vocalist. She sings beautifully, and that's true for this one as well. She's a Grammy winner for a reason. But so I didn't see the fanfare for her having to be nominated for part 1. I just didn't think she was, contributing that much, especially alongside Cynthia Erivo, who was giving this a lot of this layered performance, which, really spoke to me. So in this second part, as far as Ariana Grande's performance, I thought she's given better material here. She has more emotional material. I think she's better here in part 2 than in part 1. But I felt like, okay, she emotes authentically, she's expressive. But the inner life underneath the emotion didn't feel to me fully developed. There's a lot of surface level acting that doesn't have the deeper lived in texture that you might expect from, a more seasoned dramatic performer. That's why some moments felt a little flat or stale for me beneath the surface. I don't know if you felt that way or not. Vocally, she's very gifted. Obviously, she's an incredible musician, an incredible vocalist. But the vocal performance is stronger than the dramatic inner life. To be fair, she is still growing as a dramatic actor, and her technique is still, catching up to her musical expressiveness. And I'll also say that the character she's being given, isn't written with a whole bunch of dimensionality either, so I'm not going to lay it all on her feet. But in terms of the craft, you can feel that the internal architecture, the thought process, the subtext, the psychological grounding isn't always fully realized. She hits the emotion, but not the depth behind it. And that makes sense. Like I said, she's early in her, in developing as an actor, and, these are muscles that she's still building. I don't know how you felt.
I mean, I agree with the majority of what you've said, but to me, fundamentally, what it is a misunderstanding from parts 1 to part 2 on how to use her. And so she was well cast in part 1, and she excels in, for example, I think being the comedic relief and being the quirky energy. And I understand a lot of people who have this note or this criticism or this observation that they feel that part 2, she has, more dramatic material, more dramatic weight. The problem is that she can't sustain any of it. And the problem is also that the dramatic material is about paper thin. And so in my opinion, I think she can emote well when she performs, when she's singing. And I think that she's well versed in that in her more traditional line of work, which is, performing live and performing in front of audiences. But I always felt that even in that first film, that there wasn't a lot of layers to the character. And that, which works because the film isn't asking there to be a lot of layers. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the film is putting so much on her shoulders in this film, in Wicked for Good, that she simply can't deliver it. And part of that is also because, again, the film is not framing her well. The film is not putting her in a position to succeed. And so to me, it comes off very flat. So there's very little memorable in the performance in Wicked for Good compared to Wicked. I remember the majority of her musical numbers, and some people are going to attribute that to the music itself. But I'm also going to say that, in my opinion, a lot of it is that in Wicked for Good, everything she does is heavy and bloated.
Mm.
And I say heavy and bloated because there's actually no real, nothing really interesting dramatically going on that I'm actually compelled by. She has like the wedding thing, and she has like these realizations that I thought we were well past after that first one. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
She has all these feelings of how she wants to help Elphaba, and yet she does nothing to really move the needle forward until at the end something finally snaps for her. And so I really do feel that she suffers here because you're asking her to do more than she's capable of doing. And in the first film, you knew exactly what she had to deliver, and she more than delivered. She over delivered. And here you're asking her to do so much that is outside of her wheelhouse, and to compensate for what is just not there behind the direction, and not there in the story, and not there in the script. You're asking her to compensate for that. And a musical number like Girl in the Bubble, to me, it doesn't have dramatic weight. You know, to me, it just feels like an Ariana Grande music video that's well conceived, and I loved the way it was staged. I mean, I think it's interesting, right? It's an interesting mirrors, with the mirrors. I thought that was interesting and a good use of visual effects. But I can't tell you that it gave me any more insight into Glinda, and Glinda, you know, the character still remains an archetype for me. It never evolved past that. Right. And again, the whole revision on Glinda never felt as dimensional to me as the revision on Elphaba in Wicked 1, which again, part of that is because in Wizard of Oz, she's not even Elphaba. She's just the Wicked Witch.
Right.
And so I do think that the performance is not as good as as the first part, because the material is not as good as the first part, and because she, I don't think, has the range yet, like Cynthia Erivo, to compensate for a lack of strong material. Like I remember in Wicked 1, I didn't think Cynthia Erivo's material was great, but I thought that she knew exactly what to do with it and how to dimensionalize it. And I don't think that Ariana Grande's performance pulled that off. Right. And so a lot of my dissatisfaction with Wicked for Good comes from me not having sort of that
anchor,
emotional anchor in the piece. Right. Yeah, that she's not able to provide.
Right. Right. And so, you know, after the premieres and even after the film and even with the critical reception, I feel like so much of social media is invested in, certainly, you know, Ariana Grande fans, certainly Wicked fans, but a lot of punditry to me reads as really invested in having this be, you know, the crowning moment where Ariana Grande wins an Oscar. I don't know if it's, you know, I mean, obviously she has a lot of fans, and, you know, she was sort of the early front runner at the beginning of the year for many people. I don't know if this sort of like, you know, people really, it just feels on social media like people are really invested and they really want this to happen, for it to be Ariana Grande wins Best Supporting Actress for Wicked for Good, despite whatever happens critically or whatnot. You and I have always been of the opinion that for a person like Ariana Grande, it's almost twice as hard to get that second nomination so consecutively. As we just stated with Cynthia Erivo, they're very particular about which actors get, you know, consecutive nominations, which actors get more than one. Yeah, 2 nominations, 3 nominations, and especially which actors get consecutive nominations.
Yeah.
You know, Coleman Domingo was able to do it last year after, in between Rustin and Sing Sing. I mean, in a way, it's because they want an actor like Coleman Domingo to have several nominations. Right. You know, so like I said, they're very selective about who joins that group. And so it's just hard for me to see them considering Ariana Grande, who's just sort of starting this film career. You know, she's had a few glorified cameos and, you know, Don't Look Up and, you know, I think Zoolander 2, possibly. You know, she's been in some TV shows. I remember seeing her in Scream Queens. She had her sort of upbringing in Nickelodeon, I believe it was, or Disney Channel, one of those, you know, TV work. But, you know, her main her main skill, her main thing has always been musician. That's her. That's sort of the forefront of the platform that she's built. Um, she has Grammy nominations. So anyway, she's considered a musician first, and not necessarily an actor. And I think you're seeing that because she's getting her feet wet in this film world. She's already has some projects lined up. I think the Meet the Focker sequel is coming up, and so she's very much an actor who's beginning this film career. And so it's really hard for me to see them wanting to give her consecutive nominations for a film career that's just beginning.
Right.
And then add to that the consecutive nominations would be for the same project.
Right.
That would be for Wicked. So again, if they're selective about who gets consecutive nominations, who gets more than one nomination, and then we're going to say that the nominations that Ariana Grande is going to get, she's going to have 2 Academy Award nominations for the same movie. It's almost like, I would imagine that many actors would feel, I need to see more from you. I need to see a body of work from you before I say I want to give you a second nomination in the acting category.
And this is sort of similar to the argument that, people had with the Lady Gaga thing in House of Gucci, which is, again, just the idea that a voter, as you said, is going to want a body of work. Getting a nomination is difficult enough. Getting 2 nominations is very difficult.
Very.
Getting 2 nominations back to back is even more difficult. Getting 2 nominations back to back for the same character is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
Getting 2 nominations back to back for the same character where you feel a clear difference between the 2 products is enormously difficult. And it's not impossible, but it is absolutely enormously difficult. And if this was Ariana Grande's swan song and she's hanging up her acting shoes, then maybe there's every reason to nominate her. But everyone understands that that's not the case.
Right.
And knowing that, I expect voters to apply that knowledge. And that's sort of the sad thing about Wicked also. We talk about, again, had they fused the movies together and been less greedy, it may have gone from 10 nominations to the same 13 of Emilia Perez. It may have challenged Honora for a Best Picture win. And maybe one of the 2 performers, or maybe both performers, could have snuck away with a win. Cynthia Erivo and or Ariana Grande. That just wasn't the case. And cutting the project has only hurt it.
Right.
And so I agree. I think that for both of them, it's going to be an immense task. So much so that, at least in my opinion, whatever text it can hold on to, if there is something above the line, I almost see Best Picture more than any kind of acting.
Right.
And I know some people online are pitching, acting nominations to still happen. And I mean, acting wins, I think is already out of the solar system.
Right. It's crazy.
And so I actually can see picture a little bit more because, they can nominate Don't Look Up for Best Picture despite it being massively flawed. But they don't end up nominating Mark Rylance for supporting actor for that film.
Right.
They just don't need to.
And as we were saying with Cynthia Erivo, if history was going to be made and they were going to get back-to-back nominations, the same logic applies here. If Ariana Grande was going to get back-to-back nominations for the same movie, especially with a career that's just beginning in film, then this had to be raves, and possibly even more raves than the first. At the very minimum,
Return of the King.
Exactly. At the very minimum, the same, but possibly even more raves than the first. A film that is possibly going to win Best Picture.
Yeah.
Then I think you can possibly build the case that it's just that, incredible of a film and incredible of an achievement.
Right.
That something like this history can and should be broken.
Right.
Okay, I guess I can see it, but that's not the case here.
Yeah.
So, in a way, I find a lot of that talk kind of puzzling to me. I still don't see a universe where Ariana Grande, just again, because I think actors or the acting branch, Academy at large is very selective. I don't see a universe where Ariana Grande gets in by herself and doesn't get in with Cynthia Erivo. Again, in a way, the Cynthia Erivo and her body of work kind of brings in, we can nominate Ariana Grande, who's just beginning in her career, because, it's a pair. You're getting in with a more established actor.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't see Ariana Grande getting in by herself. And again, what the obstacles that Erivo has to face, in a way, Grande is faced with double the obstacles because she doesn't have that body of work, because she is recognized more as a musician, because again, their class of actors that they consider quote unquote worthy, for lack of a better term, to receive multiple nominations. It's a select group of people. I mean, we know actors, incredibly talented actors, some of who many who've passed, who managed one nomination in their entire career. You know, in a way, that was their Oscar. The Oscar was that moment when they were recognized for a nomination. You know, that's how we believe, and I think the patterns, the Oscar patterns show, that's how voters look at these nominations. You know, you're being invited into a club because we think that you're worthy, and so it's going to depend if we think that you're worthy.
And I think that's the way it's always worked. And you know, I think when Demi Moore or Michael Keaton score a nomination, it's a massive thing. And they have every reason to nominate Michael Keaton back to back for the Best Picture winner spotlight.
They chose not to.
And give him the win this time. And they just simply chose not to. Because one nomination for Michael Keaton is already a lot. And that nomination for Michael Keaton is a nomination for everything that Michael Keaton has done, including being in an immensely fantastic film like Birdman, the Best Picture winner.
And I think there's a section of people in the Academy who said, you know, I'm not sure I want to nominate Michael Keaton for 2 Academy Awards. I'm happy with the one.
Exactly. I'm going to wait and see when Michael Keaton delivers something that is, again, undeniable, and I'll nominate him then.
Something different.
It's something different. But
I would just want to bring up one point that a lot of people say online, is this idea that I think a lot of people, I'm not necessarily sure why they don't say it as much for Cynthia Erivo, but this idea that Ariana Grande, probably because of the competition in the categories, but the Ariana Grande is more likely to win because of the goodwill for the first one. So that's going to supposedly carry over for part 2. But I just want to say something, you know, that I think not enough people have pointed out. Wicked absolutely overperformed and got 10 nominations. That's indisputable. But are we really going to say that, number one, Wicked Part 1 was, let's say theoretically there were five films nominated for Best Picture. Is Wicked in those 5?
No.
Exactly. It would not have been in those 5.
Because it wasn't a DGA nominee and it wasn't a BAFTA nominee.
And on that same track, you know, why did Wicked have 10 nominations and only end up winning 2? But only one costume and production design. You know, it should have won sound. We were predicting a sound nomination.
I thought it was going to win
exactly.
Sound.
So why not win more than just 2? And then, you know, maybe this is a little bit nitpicky because, you know, I'm not really sure how much you can rest on this, but I do remember, you know, when journalists were covering, you know, asking Oscar voters who are they going to vote for supporting actors and whatnot. And I remember being really surprised considering the social media fanfare, and that people were thinking that, you know, Zoe Saldana shouldn't win and that it should be Ariana Grande, that she is the best in the category without a doubt. When they asked these voters who should win the category, by and large, Ariana Grande was last. I think she amassed, you know, maybe a couple of voters who said they would vote for her, and the majority of them went elsewhere. We were even surprised. Even Clayton Davis seemed surprised on Variety that it seemed that Monica Barbaro was getting a lot of traction for supporting actors. So
Rossellini.
Isabella Rossellini. So this idea that social media had that it should have been Ariana Grande who won, that she was number 2, that she was runner up, it's a lot of presumption. It's a lot of presumption on the social media stratosphere that doesn't necessarily, there's not enough evidence here to prove that that's true. So if we can't know that that's true, and the signs seem to point that we can take an educated guess that it wasn't true, then why are we to assume that this idea that Ariana Grande should win in this category because of leftover goodwill, that's a sound argument? I'm not sure that I see that.
I agree with you, but I also say, you know, social media is never a good way to predict the outcome of Oscar nominations or Oscar wins. But also say that, you know, if you're someone who engages in tracking the Oscar race and predicting it, a lot of the times, like, you don't go from 10 to 1. You know what I mean? You go through the numbers. And so, like, the honeymoon phase of Wicked being what was supposedly a 10 nominee movie or possibly in a 12 nominee movie, those are gone. And I think people are still holding on to, okay, well, it won't get 10, it'll get 7 or it'll get 6, and it can still win 1, even if it doesn't win Best Picture. But if you're someone who started out on, you know, on your best day because of diminishing returns, you're going to maybe get a 6, then a 6 and maybe a win or 2 like Dune got last year, then you're sort of already more comfortable saying, well, I think it's looking a little bit more like 3, maybe 5, and maybe you can get 1 win, maybe.
Right.
And again, I'm just not sure. I think, I just think that online and social media, they're a little bit late to that, but things will become more apparent. I do think, like I said, that ultimately the fate will lie in Avatar's hands in terms of Best Picture. But I don't think, like I said, I'm actually more comfortable saying that if there is an above the line, and that's a huge as if there is, it'll probably be Best Picture and not any type of acting. And the wins, maybe a repeat costume win, maybe.
Right.
I don't think it's a given at all. I mean, Frankenstein's there, so I don't think it's a
Sinners.
given. Sinners, I mean, Ruth is right there, so I don't think it's a given. What I do think is a given is that it'll get substantially less than what the first one got.
Right.
And I also think, for example, it's a given that Ariana Grande, I think it's very unlikely that she gets nominated. I think it's near impossible that she wins. But I think that she's going to get a moment on that stage to perform
Either way.
the girl in the bubble.
Yeah.
The girl in the bubble, which is going to be award enough for the moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if you kind of think about it, that's kind of what they have reserved for Lady Gaga also.
Right.
And so I don't think that they're in any place to sort of say, oh, well, I definitely have to give Ariana Grande an Oscar for what she achieved here and not give Lady Gaga anything.
Right, but I'll also say along this point that some people I think are very perplexed by the supporting actress category, and I guess maybe that's why Ariana Grande to some extent has had more talk about winning than Cynthia Erivo. But I want to say that if you look at the supporting actress category and you look at the reception for Wicked Part 2, it's going to be hard for you to convince me that voters aren't going to be more excited about, for example, the actresses from Sentimental Value, which is a top tier, top 5 Best Picture film. Why wouldn't they be excited about the 2 actresses from One Battle After Another, the presumed frontrunner? Why wouldn't they be excited about Sinners, which is Wunmi Mosaku? Why it just seems to me a little bit apparent that those actresses would have more passion behind them because there's more passion behind their films before having passion for Ariana Grande, who was just nominated last year.
Right.
This would be Tiana Taylor's first, Regina Hall's first, Wunmi's first, Elle Fanning's first, Inga's first. So it's hard for me. It's going to be hard for you to convince me that they're going to be more passionate about Ariana getting nominated, let alone win, than these other actresses in these films that they're going to be clearly more passionate about.
To say nothing of the Marty girls, for example.
The Marty Supreme actresses.
The actresses of Marty, have already made
that seems like a top 5 movie as well.
An impression on the people who have seen it. And I think that, going on reputation, there's plenty of reputable people who have yet to be nominated once, who people are going to remember. And I think, for example, Glenn hasn't won. Jennifer Lopez has never been nominated, but one that comes to my mind automatically, having seen the film recently, like Nina Haas. Again, Nina Haas has everything that she needs to be nominated.
Nina Haas is an iconic German actress who has never been nominated for an acting award for the Academy Awards, and she's stupendous at Hedda. I mean, she's stupendous.
Kate Blanchett, what'd you say? That's the actress. What did she say?
That's the actor I want to be.
Exactly. So that's just the caliber of actor that Nina Haas is. And again, she just has everything she needs to be nominated for Hedda. It's just a question of, are voters going to turn it on? And even if they don't, as you said, there's just so many. I mean, listen, we're averaging about one veteran supporting actress nominee.
Yeah.
We've been averaging that for, I think, maybe 6 or 7 years, for a while now, I think, at least. And what better veteran to want to put in this year than Amy Madigan? Amy Madigan Weapons, who hasn't been around, who hasn't had this opportunity in years.
Talk about how selective they are with, who gets multiple nominations. She's 75. Her first nomination was in the 80s. She might be getting her second nomination now.
Yeah.
At 75 years old. Yeah. So that's just the way these things work out.
Yeah.
So, suffice it to say that we don't think Ariana Grande is going to get nominated here. We don't see above the line. I think we're in agreement that we see strong contention in.
I mean, what are you thinking then right now? Because there are some texts that I do worry about. We talk about the visual effects are getting knocked, the production design is getting knocked. The makeup is great in photos, but it did not. I mean, the Scarecrow looked like visual effects in the film, and it's all makeup.
Yeah, you're right. The makeup on the Scarecrow looked terrible in the film, and if you look at the work, it's very detailed work.
Like in
Um,
photographs.
I think if I look at the field for some of the tech categories, I feel a little bit more comfortable because there aren't a ton of options in production design that sound, much more tempting than Crowley's work in Wicked for Good. I think the same thing about makeup, and I think the same thing about costume. So if anything, I think those three nominations seem pretty good.
I think
Again,
the Bake Off saves makeup. Because
right,
if there was no Bake Off, I would be worried.
right.
But I do think I agree with you. Costumes still one of the stars of the movie. Production design, I actually think people knock it unjustly because I see a lot of new detailed work from Nathan Crowley and his team.
Right.
I think makeup gets saved because of the Bake Off.
Right.
I think the visual effects Bake Off kind of cooks the visual effects nomination because there are instances that look very
there's
not
some
good.
shoddy visual effects in it. And I also say that I would be more enthusiastic about a sound nomination if the film was going to factor more heavily into Best Picture. I think a musical getting nominated for sound design is very difficult if it's not going to be, at the very least, a top 10 Best Picture nominee. You look at a film like Les Miserables, that wasn't a top 5 Best Picture nominee, but it was a top 10 Best Picture nominee.
Right.
So if we're taking Wicked out of Best Picture, then you have to take it out of sound because that doesn't make any sense.
So you think sound goes the way of picture. So if it gets picture, sound makes more sense.
Yeah,
if it's not going to get picture, then sound doesn't make as much sense.
Exactly. So I would say I like those 4 that I'm thinking about. I like original song, makeup, costume, production design. And if I think about it, and I think about a movie like Wakanda Forever, which is a 68 on Metacritic or a 67, and had better reviews than this film, and managed to get 5 nominations. It's going to be hard for you to convince me, and didn't get Best Picture. It got 5 nominations without Best Picture.
Despite a PGA nomination, which, by the way, I completely think that Wicked will still get
100%.
the PGA nomination.
100%. Because money matters there.
Yeah.
But so if a film like Wakanda Forever managed to get 5 nominations and still miss Best Picture, when their first iteration, Black Panther, was actually nominated for Best Picture, it's going to be hard for you to convince me that Wicked is going to get as many nominations as Wakanda Forever. I see it has to be less than Wakanda Forever, just because it's a more poorly received film critically. At least that's the way I see it. I know some people over there saying that they think that Wakanda Forever is the perfect the perfect comparison for Wicked, that they think Angela Bassett, Ariana Grande, Vortex, and I think that there's a big difference between Angela Bassett again getting her second nomination as a veteran in that category after years of being absent than there is Grande getting back to back for the same project,
right?
So I don't necessarily see that comparison, but even that, again, if that movie did 5, I would imagine that this film would do less than 5,
right? I mean, I think I'm more
or Dune Part 2, which is unanimously acclaimed and still only managed 5 nominations. Right. I can't think that Wicked is going to get the same as those films.
Right. I get where you're coming from, and I think more or less along the lines with you. I do think that Best Picture nomination will lie on how well Avatar delivers on the anticipation.
Right.
But I think if I had to see a 5th nomination, it would probably be sound, even without the top 10 Best Picture. Okay. I guess I'd have to check that out to see if I can find a musical that got in. Well, yeah, that Dreamgirls wasn't a top 5 movie. I guess you're making the argument that it's a top 10 movie. That's reasonable. But I could still, I kind of think that there may be just enough muscle in the whole musical to score that nomination for sound. And again, if we're saying that the sound nomination definitely has to come with the Best Picture nomination, I don't think that's out of the woods yet. I think it really depends on how good Avatar is.
Right.
But I could see it getting those 5 nominations and Best Picture. I can see it getting the 4 nominations you said. I guess I could also technically see it getting that second song nomination.
Oh, I don't see that at all.
Just to have Cynthia perform a musical number as well at the ceremony. I could see that. I could see that.
Well, that was our deep dive into all things Wicked. There was a lot to talk about. And we're very curious to see how things develop.
All right. Well, let's jump into the next part of our discussion, which is The precursors are about to start and get in full swing in December, but we're going to start getting some of our early ones. I think in our previous episode, we discussed the Gotham Film Award nominations a little bit, but we're going to take a deeper dive and try to get you ready for the actual winners, which are going to be announced on December 1st. And so we'll run through the categories and talk about who we're predicting to have a good day. And then maybe we'll touch upon the other ceremony that's going to happen right on the heels of that, which is the New York Film Critics Circle, which is really important for a lot of critical darlings and art house films that are trying to leverage that into getting attention and getting voters to watch them. Those wins come out on the 2nd, and we'll start talking about who we think we're going to see there. But let's start with Gotham. And I think the big takeaways, were, remember, One Battle After Another scored 6 nominations, and that's a record. Second most nominations actually went to a producer of One Battle After Another, Sarah Murphy, for producing If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, as well, from A24. Huge hit out of Sundance that had 4 nominations, including a nomination for Rose Byrne for Best Lead Performance.
Right.
Other takeaways, Sentimental Value didn't do great. Only 2 nominations, I think, for supporting performances. It was Just an Accident, No Other Choice, 3 nominations apiece. And Marty Supreme, which we had put up a piece on our website, framesandflicker.com, talking about who we thought we'd see. Marty Supreme actually was blanked. But supposedly online, there was an idea that it just didn't qualify because it was not a finished cut that screened at New York. That's a theory. We haven't heard, I think, Gotham actually say that is the reason why I didn't show up, but I guess that's what some people are rolling with.
And I also believe that the embargo lifts on December 1st for Marty Supreme for critics.
Ooh, great. So more stuff to talk about.
Right.
So let's go through the categories of the Gotham Film Awards and talk about what we might see.
Right. And who you're predicting.
Right.
So for Best Feature, we had Begonia, East of Wall, Familiar Touch, Hamnet, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, Lurker, One Battle After Another, Sorry Baby, The Testament of Ann Lee, and Train Dreams. Really good list.
A really, really good list. First off, it's the first time that they're coming up with 10, which was really interesting. A lot of controversy here, right? Because some people were unhappy that you're getting movies as big as Begonia and certainly One Battle After Another competing against Sorry Baby and Familiar Touch. Sort of felt very, some people at least online felt that it was very removed from the mission of Gotham Film Awards from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But it is what it is, and these are 10 nominees. No knocks on the movies, a lot of interesting stuff here, an eclectic mix. Obviously, One Battle After Another leads with 6 nominations. I think one thing that we're going to sort of look at the Gothams on December 1st is what kind of year we're going to have. Is this going to be a spread the wealth year or sort of like feast or famine?
Right.
I remember like in 2021, The Lost Daughter ended up winning 4 of these, including Breakthrough Director, Screenplay, Olivia Colman, and Best Feature. Marriage Story also won like 3. And that's sort of the opposite of what we've seen, for example, last year, which I was shocked again when A Different Man scored the win for Best Picture over favorites like Honora or Nickel Boys. And that was the only win it had, and it only had 2 nominations. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of year we're going to get. I think a lot of people have knocked this Best Picture list again because they just don't think that the Gotham should be highlighting films like One Battle After Another or Begonia or even Hamnet maybe, and they should be focusing on smaller films like East of Wall. It'll be interesting because one thing that we're going to see play out is A24 has been on a streak actually here in this category. Different Man won last year, Past Lives the year before that, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. And so, according to that, the favorite here would appear to be
If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. At the same time, Paul Thomas Anderson's film set the record. Paul Thomas Anderson, last time he was nominated at the Gotham Film Awards was for The Master in 2012. It got 1 nomination for Best Feature, but they have nominated him in the past. I couldn't find any other reference for a nomination for one of Paul's films. There Will Be Blood was not nominated, for example, but they had a stricter regimen or
Right.
eligibility that sort of disqualified a film of that budget level. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Are we going to see the A24 streak continue with If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You? Or are we going to see that record for Paul come into play and it pick up a win here? Obviously, they like Paul. They nominated the master. It sort of reminds me of 2006, if you can remember. That was one year that critics gave a lot of heat to the Gotham Film Awards because they ended up nominating The Departed, Little Children, and Marie Antoinette in the Best Picture category. And those films had significant budgets. And people complained that wasn't the purpose of the Gotham Film Awards. The purpose of the Gotham Film Awards should have been to spotlight a film, for example, like A Prairie Home Companion or Little Miss Sunshine, but instead they were nominating these big, massive studio films that also happened to be auteur projects, but they were still very budgeted highly compared to small films. Yet in that year, the winner was Half Nelson. Half Nelson ended up beating The Departed at the Gotham Film Awards. So I think what we're going to see If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You win Best Picture over One Battle After Another.
Very interesting. Sort of as a response.
Exactly.
A little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Or as a response to the controversy. Yeah.
And very interesting. Very interesting. For Best Director, we had Mary Bronstein, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Jafar Panahi, It Was Just an Accident. Kelly Reichardt, The Mastermind. Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another, and Oliver Lax for Surratt.
I think it's a great list. Very eclectic. I think it's worth mentioning this is only the second time that they're handing this out. The Best Director category started last year. More traditionally, they've always had a Breakthrough Director category for first-time filmmakers, but this is not that. This is for a filmmaker of at any point in their career. Obviously, you see Paul Thomas Anderson there competing against Mary Bronstein. I think, again, these are the two favorites to win the category, either Mary Bronstein or PTA. I think here is where you'll get the compensation prize, and they'll give it to PTA, to Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another.
Right. That sounds very sound. For Breakthrough Director, we had Constance Sang for Blue Sun Palace, Carson Lund for Ephus, Sarah Friedland for Familiar Touch, Akina Law, Davis Jr., My Father's Shadow, and Harris Dickinson for Urchin. Great list.
Great list. Again, not a lot of movies that I think will follow this nomination into possible Oscar attention, but this category has always been part of the ceremony, always been part of the Gothams. It's great that they still have it. I hope they don't disqualify it, although you never know what the Gothams are going to do from one year to the next. Previous winners here have been Past Lives, 1001, and After Sun. And I think the favorite here is probably going to end up being Familiar Touch. Yeah. It was also nominated for Best Picture, and so that helps.
Yeah. For Best Original Screenplay, we have If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, It Was Just an Accident, The Secret Agent, Sorry Baby, and Sound of Falling.
Really interesting category as well. I will say this is the first time that the Gothams have split this category between original and adapted. There used to be just one
screenplay. Yeah.
So it's nice to see 10 screenplays being spotlighted. I think it's also massively interesting to see so many international films listed here, right? You have Just an Accident, Secret Agent, Sound of Falling. Obviously, the favorite should be If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, because it has all those nominations, but I'm thinking that the win is actually going to go to another A24 title, and that's Sorry Baby,
Me too,
which actually got listed for Best Picture as well, and this feels like the right, appropriate place to award it. Ava Victor did not get nominated for Breakthrough Director, but I think, which is interesting, right? But I do think that they'll maybe make some room here and give her original screenplay.
Right, I think that makes a lot of sense. Best Adapted Screenplay, No Other Choice, One Battle After Another, Pillion, Preparation for the Next Life, and Train Dreams.
So, again, the temptation I think here is to probably have One Battle After Another win this, but I don't think that the Gothams like to give one film so many awards. Obviously, it could be a feast or famine year, but I think One Battle already has the record with 6 nominations. So I'm thinking that this would be a good place to maybe show some love to No Other Choice, which is a film that they liked a lot. Also, it got 3 nominations.
Right.
And so I'm thinking that for adapted screenplay, they'll go in that direction.
Watch out, because I think a sleeper here is Train Dreams to win Best Adapted Screenplay.
Really? Also
because,
listed for Best Picture?
Right, because not only that, but, it's certainly having an uptick in discourse. It just came out on Netflix, and it just seems like an opportune place to cite it, so watch out for that as well.
Yeah.
For Best Documentary Feature, we have 2,000 Meters to Andrivka, Black News Terms and Conditions, My Undesirable Friends Part 1, Last Air in Moscow, The Perfect Neighbor, Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk.
I actually think this is the best category at Gotham. I think all the films look tremendous. The ones we've seen are great, but all of them look great. So it's very, very difficult to decide on the winner here. They've been trending a little bit more international lately, like No Other Land won last year, Four Daughters the year before that, and All That Breathes, which you loved, the year before that. But they have also recognized, for example, Ramel Ross won this category for Hale County this evening. And so they definitely do also recognize films that are occurring in the U.S. So it's very tough. I mean, it's very, very difficult to say who could win here. The Perfect Neighbor is a great choice. Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk. Black News Terms and Conditions. I think it's going to come down to the fact that Julia Lochtive has been nominated a couple of different times at Gotham. We love Julia Lochtive here.
Yeah.
Loneliest Planet is great. Day Night is fantastic. First time I think she's being nominated in the documentary category. So look for the win to go to My Undesirable Friends, Part 1.
That sounds like, I agree with you.
That would be great. And it's obviously about the Russian government stifling free press in Russia, but it's very much prescient to everything that's going on in the U.S.
Of course. Best International Feature, we have It Was Just an Accident, No Other Choice, Nouvelle Vague, Resurrection, Sound of Falling.
Again, all of them sound great. The ones we've seen are fantastic. Can't wait to see Resurrection.
Sound of Falling is incredible.
Yeah, I think this one is between No Other Choice and It Was Just an Accident. And I think it should favor It Was Just an Accident. And I think they really want to see Jafar Panahi on stage.
I agree.
So I think that's the best bet.
Right, I agree. And now a pair of really interesting categories, the performances. Outstanding Lead Performance. We have Jessie Buckley for Hamnet, Rose Byrne, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, Lee Byung-hun, No Other Choice, Sope Derusu, My Father's Shadow, Ethan Hawke, Blue Moon, Jennifer Lawrence, Die My Love, Wagner Moura, The Secret Agent, Josh O'Connor, The Mastermind, Amanda Seyfried, The Testament of Anne Lee, Tessa Thompson, Hedda.
I mean, all fantastic
Incredible
performances.
Terrific list.
And I think we'll be seeing a lot of these names throughout the rest of the season. And I think this is going to be a classic battle for, I think, a narrative that's going to continue throughout the rest of the year. I think this is Byrne versus Buckley.
I 100% agree with that.
And you got Rose Byrne delivering an amazing performance. And If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. She's in nearly every shot and just almost strictly her face in every shot. Versus Jessie Buckley, who, believe it or not, this is her 4th nomination.
Wow.
And so we know that the Gothams, had they only had 5 movies nominated for Best Picture, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You would very likely still be a Best Picture nominee. Questionable whether Hamnet would have been there or not. It only has 2 nominations, Picture and Jessie Buckley. But we know that they love them some Jessie Buckley, who has a nomination for Women Talking, The Lost Daughter, Hamnet, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So does Buckley finally win on her 4th nod, or does Rose Byrne win?
I'm thinking that it's going to be Jessie Buckley. I mean, it makes sense for it to be Rose Byrne. I think Rose Byrne is, prepping to be a critical darling this year, 100%. But I do think that it's going to be Jessie Buckley, 100%.
I think that would be so interesting.
Especially
think it's
since
a toss-up.
I think they'll split.
So
if
share the wealth. You're thinking
exactly. If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. If that wins Best Picture, then Jessie Buckley's winning actress.
I think that could happen, but I'm kind of going that If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You wins both, and I'm thinking Rose Byrne will end up winning here.
And then outstanding supporting performance, Benicio del Toro, One Battle After Another, Jacob Elordi, Frankenstein, Inga Ipstadter Lilias, Sentimental Value, India Moore, Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, Wunmi Mosaku, Sinners, Adam Sandler, Jay Kelly, Andrew Scott, Blue Moon, Alexander Skarsgård, Pillion, Stellan Skarsgård, Sentimental Value, Teyana Taylor, One Battle After Another.
I think a lot of these names, again, will continue to ripple throughout the rest of the season.
Yes.
I think it's fun to see, for example, some love there for Alexander Skarsgård and Pillion.
Yes.
I think the big story here,
Pillion.
yeah, I can't wait to see. I think the big story here, though, is will the dual nominations for Sentimental and One Battle cancel each other out? Or will one of them be able to survive and actually pull off the win?
Yeah.
I think it's, again, another coin toss, but my gut says it'll end up going to Teyana Taylor. She's a previous nominee here for 1001, which is a film that they really liked, I think listed for Best Picture also.
Right.
So it just seems like they couldn't be happier to get her up on that stage and give her something.
Right. And then Breakthrough Performer, we have ASAP Rocky for Highest to Lowest, Sibiye Bitayar for Preparation for the Next Life, Chase Infinity for One Battle After Another, Abu Sangare for Suleiman's Story, and Tonatiuh for Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
I would love to see Tonatiuh win this for Kiss of the Spider-Woman, and I think he's a dark horse here. I think all the performances look great, but I think the favorite has to be Chase Infinity with just the amazing year that she's had.
Right.
And just, the amount of love that One Battle has here.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the Gotham.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, we're going to now talk about the New York Film Critics Circle.
Which is not unrelated.
Absolutely. I think you'll have voters, members of the Gotham that are also members of the NYFCC. And I actually think that we stand to see some winners who win the Gotham that go on to win awards at the NYFCC and start to sort of certainly develop into that critical darling for that category. So
start to get some momentum.
For example, Rose Byrne could easily get the win both the Gotham and the NYFCC, and then before you know it, everyone will be talking about how Rose Byrne is the critical darling.
Yes.
If that happens, we said it here first.
Yes.
And Teyana Taylor, she might win the Gotham Award Best Supporting and then go on to win the NYFCC Best
Very
Supporting,
much so.
and then she's very much the critical darling. Again, that's what people will be talking about.
Yeah.
So the NYFCC,
which is, I think, one of our first of the big three. NYFCC, well, shortly after we'll have LA, and then towards the end of the month, beginning of the year, we'll finally get our look into the National Society of Film Critics.
Right. And it's always fun to do. We always look forward to the NYFCC, the LAFCA, and the National Society of Film Critics. Always fun to predict them.
Because they have taste also.
Yes, because you can always... Well, I mean, sometimes they do odd choices like cinematography going to Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
But by and large, they tend to have really good winners and sometimes incredibly great winners. So we look forward to them. Shall we start with our predictions?
Yeah. And let's do a winner and a runner-up at least.
Okay, so for animated film, we're going to start bottom to top. Animated film, I'm predicting that the winner will be K-pop Demon Hunters. I think that they tend to sometimes give the animated win to a more popular pick. So K-pop would make sense. My runner-up for animated would be Scarlet.
I will say that for my money, at least, this is a year that's very difficult to sort of distinguish who the critical darling is going to be for animated feature. I think K-pop is too mainstream for the highbrow New York film critics.
Well, I mean, they like mainstream sometimes.
I don't know. I mean, they did give it to the Mitchells versus the Machines, but knowing what that film is about versus K-pop makes me feel that they're going to reject K-pop. I've met a couple of people who do not like K-pop.
Right.
That said, I wonder if Arco is a little too under the radar. I'm not even going to mention Zootopia 2. Or Elio or anything like that. I'm going to go with a surprise here. And I think my prediction for the win is actually going to be the Quay brothers. who released Sanatorium Under the Sign of the Hourglass this year. And I know that it played in New York. I was around when it played. And I think maybe a passionate group saw it and are going to petition for it to win. I think it'll be the first win for the Quaid brothers in this organization, and that'll make it even more enticing. If not, I kind of agree with you. I think the one to look out for here is Scarlet from Mamoru Hosoda in Japan, and so I think that's where I see it going right now.
Very interesting. Very interesting. If it happens, you called it first. Best documentary. I'm pretty comfortable with this. Feel confident that it's going to go to Black News Terms and Conditions, which has made waves ever since Sundance. And my runner-up would be Laura Poitra's Cover Up.
Both very good choices, and we overlap. I think Black News Terms and Conditions has to be the favorite here. Has had a great trajectory ever since Sundance. I can't wait to see it. They say it's fantastic.
Yeah, me too.
But my runner-up is actually going to be Julie Lochtov's documentary, My Undesirable Friends, Part 1, off the heels of what may be a win out of Gotham.
Yeah. For Best International Film, this was a tough one because I was between 3 films that I feel pretty confident one of them will place here. Now watch me be completely wrong. So my prediction is that it was just an accident. My runner-up is Sound of Falling, but I wanted to find a place for Surat, so I'm going to say it's going to be either Sound of Falling or Surat for that international pick as my runner-up.
I'm going to say that this is one of the most competitive categories at NYFCC this year. There are just so many great international films this year. It feels like it's an especially difficult year to predict this particular category. Again, not all these movies qualified, I think, for the Oscar. But all of them are great movies out of Cannes, out of Venice. I agree with you. I think the favorite here has to be It Was Just an Accident, despite the fact that the New York Film Critics Circle have not necessarily been crazy about Jafar Panahi's work. I think it's kind of an irresistible story to have him there. So I think the win will go to It Was Just an Accident. My runner-up actually is actually going to be the Brazilian film, The Secret Agent, which did really well at Cannes also. And I know that New Yorkers like the filmmaker a lot, Cleveland Dontrafil. And so I would not be surprised to see him pick this one up. Now, I will say, usually when New York, when they give best film to the foreign film that they also think was the best foreign film, best international film, they'll skip this category altogether. Yeah, exactly, but I do think this year they're gonna they're not gonna give It Was Just an Accident best picture, and they'll give it international film, and they'll go elsewhere for best picture.
Right, I agree. For best first film, my prediction is Sorry Baby, and my runner-up is Familiar Touch.
Both excellent choices, and I can see both of them winning. And I always think this is a fun category. I think they always make a quality choice here. I'm actually going to go with Familiar Touch, off the heels of a couple of really good mentions from Gotham Film Awards. And my runner-up, despite how much I love Sorry Baby, I'm actually going to give it to EFUS, which was fantastic, and which I think there's something that I think the New York crowd is really going to love about it. Yeah, that'd be awesome. So for cinematography, it was tough. I was between 3 movies. I ended up choosing my prediction, Resurrection from Bayan, which stunned people at Cannes. We unfortunately missed it. I can't wait to see it. I predict that they're gonna show some love to Resurrection. My runner-up is Sinners, as a populist pick that they'd be happy to award something like cinematography to. Which they've done in the past. I remember when Oppenheimer picked up this award, and also Top Gun Maverick picked it up. And so I do think they can go in the populist direction. In fact, I think if Sinners were to pick up any category, it would likely be cinematography. That being said, my prediction is going to be that the win is actually going to go to Magellan out of the Philippines. I think there's a lot in the film that, again, the New York crowd is really going to admire. Again, very much subdued, slow cinema that Lav Diaz is known for. But again, beautifully lit, a lot of naturalistic lighting. Yeah, you saw it at Cannes. Yeah, saw it at Cannes. Lav Diaz, also credited as a co-cinematographer here. So I think it'll be Magellan, but my runner-up I think is also Resurrection, because I think it just looks like such a visual feast.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
that it's going to be hard to forget about it.
I agree. For screenplay, my prediction is Sentimental Value, and my runner-up would be It Was Just an Accident.
Both good choices. I'm actually, this was the one area where like I found room to include one movie that I'm unsure of as to how they're going to feel about. But knowing that it's a New York story, I kind of felt like I had to give it something. And so we won't know because the embargo lifts, but I can already see the narrative. And if it happens, again, you heard it here first. But if the embargo lifts and Marty Supreme is as beloved as that New York crowd that saw it at the New York Film Festival made it sound, and it's just absolutely beloved, I would not be shocked if Marty Supreme won Best Picture and Best Director and Best Actor at the New York Film Critics Circle. Not at all.
Right.
That being said, at the very least, I'm going to predict it for Best Screenplay. So I have Marty Supreme for the win. And my runner-up is actually going to be Blue Moon, which I'm not sure is a major Oscar contender, but it's sort of the... For screenplay. But it's sort of the well-researched, old school kind of script that I think the New York crowd is really going to take to.
All right. And for supporting actor, I'm predicting my prediction is Stellan Skarsgård for Sentimental Value. I think he's going to be a big critical darling here for this category. And my runner-up would be Benicio del Toro for One Battle After Another, who's fucking incredible in that movie. Great
choices. I think we're of the same mind. I think Stellan Skarsgård should be the favorite here for Sentimental Value, given his reputation, given his performance, given the character he plays. I actually have the runner-up being Alexander Skarsgård and Pillion. For some reason, I feel like this film is going to resonate with the New York Film Critics Circle. I know you're a big fan of it.
I fucking adore this movie, but I'm confused as to if it even counts as this year or not.
Right.
It's so strange because it's coming out in February. Makes sense for Valentine's Day,
right?
But then it looks like A24 is pushing it. I have no idea what the hell's going on.
And A24 hasn't been very transparent about it, which is not surprising. But yeah, I'm going to guess that it is eligible, and I'm going to have that be my runner-up. That said, keep an eye out for Adam Sandler here, for Jay Kelly.
Yeah.
Despite whatever critical reception it has, I think there may just be enough sentiment behind that pick to make it happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. He was lurking for me. For supporting actress, I'm going to go with a surprise pick that I feel kind of good about. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. If it happens, again, you heard it here first. I'm going to go with Wunmi Mosaku winning Best Supporting Actress for Sinners.
Nice.
Which departs a little bit from my runner-up, which is Teyana Taylor for One Battle, who I expect to be a big critics darling this season. But I just think that I expect One Battle to show up in other places, and that they're going to be more willing in this particular category to cite someone like Wunmi for Sinners.
I think that's a great pick, honestly. Wunmi could win here.
And then watch everyone go crazy like, my God, she's back in the
honestly,
race.
I think it would be very meaningful, to be perfectly honest, because for some reason, like I told you, I think Sinners is more of
They're going to be like, people are going to be like, but she's number 9 on Gold Derby. How's that possible?
Well, listen, we had this discussion, and I think that Sinners is a little bit more of an LA film. I think the LA film critics are going to take to it more. They kind of like their auteur blockbuster studio films a little bit more than the New York Film Critics Circle. They tend to be a little bit more highbrow, sort of classic auteur films, Martin Scorsese films. So I think it's a great pick, and I think it would be huge if it won. But I'm actually going to go with your runner-up. I think the win here is going to go to Teyana Taylor, and what I think they're going to think is an amazingly memorable performance. That said, I kind of wanted to give it to Regina Hall for One Battle After Another,
right?
But she won recently for Support the Girls in 2018. So that was my only pause.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, to see her. I actually wouldn't be surprised if I saw some kind of the women of One Battle After
Oh
Another
yeah,
share
that'd
the
be
award.
awesome. Actually,
Could
I'd love
could
that.
actually end up happening unless they think it's cheap. My runner-up is actually going to be Amy Madigan in Weapons. Um, sometimes they have room for a populist film.
I feel like supporting actors is a category they tend to want to
Yeah.
play with. You
I
know,
mean, I remember last year I kind of called or I felt very good about the win for Carol Kane in
oh yeah, you
Between the
called it.
Temples because she's
You,
amazing in that film. But I knew it was going to be the kind of thing that they loved. And so I'm going with Amy Madigan, former nominee Amy Madigan. I don't know, maybe it's theatrical enough that they'll like it, or maybe theatrical enough that they'll remember it, you know?
right. That would certainly be a big get for her.
Yeah.
For best actor, my prediction is Wagner Moura. I think he is one of the best performances of the year in The Secret Agent. I think he's absolutely going to be a critics' darling. I expect him to win, I think, all three of the top critics prizes. So yeah, I feel pretty confident that he's going to win best actor for The Secret Agent. And my runner up is actually No Other Choice.
Lee Bingyun.
Lee Byung-yun, who's freaking incredible in No Other Choice. He gives an amazing, one of the best performances as well. Either of these winners are going to be great.
Honestly, actor is such a competitive category. Again, you have two great picks, and it's so difficult for me to pick between them, between Lee Byung-yun and Wagner Moura. And I know that both films are going to be well regarded by critics and are going to be very memorable. Both performances are going to be very memorable, and I think we'll hear both of those names throughout the critics circuit this year. But I'm actually going to go a little bit on a limb and say that best actor is actually going to go to Sergi Lopez for Sarat. And I don't know, there's something
That's
about
an out of the box pick.
it's such an out of the box pick, but there's something about what I think he's being asked to do in the film that might resonate a lot with film critics, maybe New York film critics. And so I kind of can't decide between No Other Choice and The Secret Agents. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the win goes to Sarat. And then my runner-up is either of those would be great candidates.
Wow.
No Other Choice or The Secret Agent.
Wow, very interesting. Very interesting.
If that happens, that would be amazing. I mean, if for those of you who don't know, Sergio Lopez, most of you are going to recognize him from his performance in Pan's Labyrinth, where he actually won a mention at the Los Angeles Film Critics for supporting actor that year in 2006.
Right.
And so I think what better way to recognize Sarat than to give it to Sergio Lopez?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be so cool. For Best Actress, I feel pretty confident that the win here will be Rose Byrne for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. I think it'll be off the heels, as we said, of the Gotham win or possible win. And it'll kickstart the narrative of her being the critic's darling. My runner-up actually would be for Amanda Seyfried in The Testament of Anne Lee.
Wow.
Who's incredible in that film.
Yeah.
And I think certainly these top tier critics groups are going to be very happy to consider her for a win. For this movie.
So. I hope so.
I love that.
I worry that they're going to think it's like, I'm worried that they're going to be turned off by the musical aspect, which would be a shame. But I love that she got nominated for the Gotham, and that the film got nominated for Gotham. I thought that was great. Yeah. But I agree with you. I think this is Rose Byrne's to lose. I also say that I think Rose Byrne absolutely needs to win this. I think Rose Byrne needs to run the gamut and win all three to survive what is going to essentially be, I think, a largely unlikable movie. My runner-up is actually going to be Sentimental Value. I think it's interesting that we both have said no to Jessie Buckley. And I think that's because I think that Hamnet isn't highbrow enough for the New York Film Critics. That reads more to me like an emotional choice made at the LA Film Critics.
I agree.
You agree?
I agree.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. For Best Director, I think that this is the award I'm most confident about. Is my prediction is PTA for One Battle After Another. I think he absolutely is going to win this category. He's never won director here, only writing. So this is a chance to give him finally the Best Director prize. And my runner-up would be Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident.
And I think for the first time, are 100% match. I completely agree. I think the favorite has to be Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another. And the runner-up should be Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident. I think you're 100% right. If you kind of look at the trajectory of PTA, of Paul at the New York Film Critics, You know, his films have collectively have won supporting actor for Boogie Nights, actor for There Will Be Blood, cinematography for There Will Be Blood. He's won screenplay a couple of times for Licorice Pizza and Phantom Thread. The Master was a semifinalist for film and director. There Will Be Blood was a semifinalist for film and director. He has never won director.
Right.
And so I think
Yeah.
if they do not give him the award for best director here, when the hell else are they going to?
I think this is the most no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
And then finally for best film, my prediction is that One Battle After Another will win best film, and the runner-up will be Sentimental Value. I am a firm believer that One Battle is going to be the far and away favorite pick amongst the top critics and amongst the regional critics as well. It will just be a very you'll be hearing that a lot. One Battle winning best picture. And so I think it'll start here at the NYFCC. I will say that the NYFCC has a history as of late of picking their winners for Best Picture end up being not the winners for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. That's been a trend as of late.
They don't correlate?
Right, they don't correlate. But I will say that I think this year One Battle will just be such a behemoth and will win just you know, the 80-90% of the critics groups where that won't matter. Because I do think One Battle will possibly win all three of the top critics. So that's how I see it.
I mean, I could very well see that happening. And I agree thus far, at least with the New York Film Critics. I think the Best Picture favorite has to be One Battle After Another. Again, Paul Thomas Anderson has never picked up Best Picture here. If not now, then when? I can't think of a better occasion to give it to him. My runner-up is actually interesting, and I think I bring it up for a couple reasons. Number one, because you dodged the title completely. Number two, because can it really go empty? And number three, the embargo lifts. And number four, it's a New York story. And so my runner-up, because I can't find a film that comes anywhere near One Battle After Another in terms of how heavy of a favorite it should be, I think my runner-up for Best Picture is Marty Supreme, because I don't know. I don't know what the expectation is yet. And so you went the entire way without mentioning it, and we both left it off of Best Actor, which everyone sort of agrees is its best shot at winning an Oscar.
Right.
And so my question to you is, what's up with that?
Actually, maybe it's because I haven't heard enough about Marty Supreme, but also because I just felt that these films were going to be more passionate about. I think they're more passionate about
more established.
One Battle and Sentimental Value, and it was just an accident and no other choice, you know. So I didn't find the right place to put it without sacrificing one of those films not being mentioned. So I think that's why I left it off.
That makes sense. I mean, I will say that I purposely left it off of Actor because Chalamet did win for Call Me By Your Name, and I did not feel comfortable with him winning two in the same category at such a young age. The Safdie brothers did end up surprising here when they won Best Director for Uncut Gems.
Right.
So I didn't want to repeat them there in Best Director, but I do feel like it sort of signifies that this particular critics group looks highly upon their work. I also think that, let's be honest, they're New Yorker filmmakers. Like, their films are very much of the New Yorker energy and the New York energy. And I think that has an effect on how well they do. I think there's a reason why they premiered at the New York Film Festival. I think there's a reason why the crowd absolutely adored it. And so to me, I think this film might actually play more New York, like The Anti-Sinners. This will play more New York than Los Angeles film critics. I think it was absolutely storybook. And I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the movie gods or the Oscar gods or whoever's pulling the strings behind, you know, the award circuit have planned it so that the embargo lifts on the day that Marty Supreme wins Best Picture and Best Actor at the New York Film Critics Circle. And they decide to just give Paul Best Director, which I think is a total jip, because I doubt that Marty can be that good.
Well, I think Marty's the first and the NYCC is the second.
What do you mean?
That Marty, the embargo lives on the first, and that the NYCC is announced on the second. I believe that's how it is.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. nonetheless,
still,
I still
timing
think
it around the same
the
period.
timing
Yeah,
would
is
be very interesting.
suspect. Yeah,
Like, could you have planned it any better? I don't know.
I agree. 100%. Yeah.
But so that's the reason why I'm keeping Marty as the runner-up. I also think it's the one film that it's still kind of a question mark to me. Like, how adored is it gonna be?
Right.
At this point, I understand how well liked the other films are. I just don't think that they can catch up to One Battle yet.
Right. Well, with that concludes the this episode. Going through Wicked and the Gotham Awards and the NYCC will be very interesting to see who pulls out ahead. And also, as soon as December hits, we'll get a slew of critics groups and awards groups. So plan on hearing a lot about that. We're gonna try to make episodes a little bit more frequently so we can make sure that we grab all those
micro changes
and how the race shifts. Also, just a reminder that our predictions have been updated, so go check it out. All our predictions are on our website, framesandflicker.com, and also follow us on Twitter at Academy Anon. And until next time.
Until next time, I'm your co-host, Joseph.
And I'm Jules, and it's been a pleasure. The music on this episode, entitled Cool Cats, was graciously provided by Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. https://creativecommons.org/licenses/by/3.0.
Disclaimer. The Academy Anonymous podcast is in no way affiliated or endorsed by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.